Chapter 337. Wait. Tiange stopped what the sea dragon was about to say. How do I know you're not lying to me this time? The sea dragon opened its mouth and froze. After a while, it said, But you beat me, but you didn't kill me. It thought that for humans, this behavior was a show of kindness. Tiange said lightly, I didn't kill you because you used to be my great ancestor's spiritual beast. For the sake of my great ancestor, since you're not a threat to me, I don't mind letting you go. This sentence made the sea dragon feel Tiange's strong confidence. It couldn't help but ask, Then you, but for the sake of my great ancestor, are you also kind to me? Tiange looked straight at it. After all, the spiritual beast contract has expired. You're just a demonic beast to me now. The sea dragon floated in the air, and its eyes became distant. Its injuries were not light, and tiny drops of blood kept dripping into the sea. Although we demonic beasts are hostile to humans, we'll be grateful if a human saves us, the sea dragon said calmly. 6,000 years ago, I lived in the sea of returning ruins. My whole clan was slaughtered and I was almost killed. It was my master who saved me. So, I was willing to sign a spiritual beast contract with her and become her spiritual beast. Tiange's eyes moved. She put her hand into her Qiankuan bag, took out a jade bottle, and threw it over. Eat it. Your injuries are very serious. The sea dragon opened its mouth and bit the jade bottle. There was doubt in its eyes. I also want to make a deal with you. The sea dragon shook its head and didn't speak. I know that demonic beasts like you don't have medicinal pills to eat, so your cultivation is much slower than that of humans. Moreover, the most difficult hurdle for demonic beasts is the 7th rank to the 8th rank. If you can pass it, you can transform and become a real spiritual creature, but if you can't, you'll always be a demonic beast. Tiange raised her eyebrows and said proudly, I can give you medicinal pills that may help you successfully advance to the 8th rank, but in exchange, you must let your descendants sign a spiritual beast contract with me and tell me that secret. Tiange smiled. Of course, the medicinal pills you're biting are not part of the deal. They're just for you to heal. The sea dragon didn't communicate with her again. A trace of doubt flashed in its eyes, but soon, it bit the jade bottle and swallowed all the medicinal pills inside. Subsequently, a faint layer of spiritual energy appeared around its body, wrapping around its wounds. Then, the wounds lit up with a white light, and in the white light, the wounds healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, the light dissipated. The sea dragon turned its head, wagged its tail, and said, Thank you, my injuries are much better. Tiange smiled. Can we talk about our deal? The sea dragon hesitated for a moment and said, Our sea dragon clan is very happy in this sea. I don't want my descendants to become the spiritual beasts of human cultivators again. In the face of this answer, Tiange smiled. Even if I give you medicinal pills that can help you advance to the 8th rank? The sea dragon twisted its head and seemed to be struggling. After a while, it said, It's not easy for demonic beasts to advance to the 8th rank. I've been with Master for 1,000 years, but I've only advanced from the 5th rank to the 7th rank. No matter how many medicinal pills Master has given me, I've never advanced to the 8th rank. I don't think it's worth exchanging the freedom of my descendants. Hearing this, Tiange nodded gently. You care about your descendants very much. The sea dragon blinked and showed some kindness. As long as you stop hunting the sea beasts in this area, I'll tell you this secret. It's still valid. Although we sea clans hunt and kill each other, your indiscriminate killing will destroy the balance between us. The sea dragon clan has a good life here, and we don't want to give it up. I see. Tiange sighed. She looked at the sea dragon and said, But how can I believe your secret is true? The sea dragon was stunned. It wagged its tail and seemed a little distressed. Well, you're willing to take the risk to stop me for your descendants, which shows that your clan cares about them very much, right? The sea dragon fell silent. After a while, its eyes flashed with determination. Human, even if you kill me, I won't give up the freedom of my descendants. Tiange smiled and waved her hand. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. Let me ask you, you're only a 7th-rank demonic beast, but you can live for nearly 10,000 years. So, the lifespan of sea dragons can reach 10,000 years? The sea dragon hesitated for a moment and nodded. Yes, at least 10,000 years. Then, for you, the lifespan of human cultivators is very short, right? After a moment of silence, the sea dragon agreed again. When I followed Master, I had lived for thousands of years. At that time, Master was still very young, but after Master passed away, I lived for thousands of years. So, let your descendants follow me. Even if I'm as strong as your Master in the future, the price is only 1,000 years of freedom, right? The sea dragon didn't object to this conclusion. Tiange smiled. What if I can let it rush to the 8th rank? Is it worth more than 1,000 years of freedom? Upon hearing this, the sea dragon froze. Doubt, calculation, and hesitation flashed in its eyes. Tiange knew it needed to think, so she didn't urge it. She just waved the heaven and earth fan in her hand and looked around as if she was just standing there watching the scenery. Advancing to the 8th rank was almost an irresistible temptation for demonic beasts. Although this sea dragon refused once, it would be difficult to refuse again. After a long time, the voice sounded in its mind again. You're only in the 6th rank. Can you really do it? This is something even my master couldn't do. Tiange smiled. Wait here for a moment and you'll know whether it's possible or not. After that, she touched the spot between her eyebrows and cast a spell. Under the sea dragon's shocked gaze, she entered the virtual sky world. In order to heal Lord Daoist Jinghe, she had used up the flowerless golden fruit, but she still had other spiritual medicines that could help advance. After wandering around the medicinal field, Tiange grabbed 100 fruits and came out of the virtual sky world. Seeing her suddenly appear in front of it, the sea dragon was shocked. It shook its head, somewhat confused. Did humans invent some magic arts again? But then its eyes were attracted by the 100 fruits in Tiange's hand. Although it had lived in the sea for a long time, it didn't prevent it from seeing that this was a 10,000-year-old spiritual fruit. The 10,000-year-old spiritual fruit contained a huge amount of spiritual aura. If it ate it, it was very likely to break through to the 8th rank in one fell swoop. Seeing the sea dragon's shocked look and its undisguised stare at the fruit in her hand, Tiange smiled. Do you believe me now? The sea dragon couldn't help but swallow. It moved its eyes away from the 100 fruits with difficulty and looked at Tiange. This time, it was silent for a long time. Tiange wasn't in a hurry and just waited patiently. After a long time, the sea dragon's voice sounded. Human, I believe you. Although you're not as strong as my master with these treasures, maybe you can really make your spiritual beast break through to the 8th rank. It hesitated for a moment and finally said firmly, well, I'll go tell my descendants and see if any of them are willing to be your spiritual beast. Tiange smiled. Okay, just go. I'll wait here. The sea dragon nodded, flicked its tail, and dived into the sea in a hurry. Tiange looked at the place where it disappeared and put away the 100 fruits. She wasn't afraid that the sea dragon would come up with some ideas to snatch it. It certainly wouldn't be willing to share a spiritual fruit that could help it break through to the 8th rank with other 7th-rank demonic beasts. Moreover, if it agreed to her request, it might have another 8th-rank demonic beast among its descendants, which was very attractive to the sea dragon who loved its descendants very much. She tried every possible means to accept a sea dragon as a spiritual beast, not only because she felt that this race had wisdom that ordinary demonic beasts didn't have, but more importantly, its descendants were the old sea dragon's weakness. In the beginning, it had been so malicious to her and wanted to deceive and kill her. How could she dare to believe the secret it told her? Only if she accepted its descendants as spiritual beasts would she dare to believe its words. Before long, spiritual aura fluctuations came from the sea again. Tiange roughly recognized that the leader was a 7th-rank demonic beast, and there were several 5th-rank and 6th-rank demonic beasts. A moment later, the sea dragon emerged with its descendants. Human, my descendants are willing to agree to your conditions. You can choose one of them. Tiange looked down. In addition to the old sea dragon, There were 5 little sea dragons in front of her, 3 in the 5th rank and 2 in the 6th rank. They were much smaller than the old sea dragon, and the smallest one had a wound on its tail. It was the one she had injured at the beginning. "You are all willing?" The 5 little sea dragons all wagged their tails and didn't answer immediately. One of them asked, "Can you really help Grandpa advance?" Emotienga was even more surprised. "Can you also speak human language?" The old sea dragon said, "As long as we sea dragons reach the 5th rank, we will have wisdom no lower than that of other 8th rank demonic beasts." "Oh." Emotienga nodded and answered the previous question. "I can only give it a spiritual fruit that can help it advance, but I can't guarantee whether it can really advance." The 5 little sea dragons looked at each other and excitedly patted their tails. "Then we're all willing." Hearing this, Emotienga smiled. It seemed that not only did the old sea dragon love its descendants, but its descendants also respected their ancestor very much, which made her feel relieved. She turned to the old sea dragon and asked, "Are your descendants thousands of years old?" The old sea dragon said, "Xiaofan is only 800 years old, and the others are more than 1,000 to 4,000 years old." "Xiaofan?" The little sea dragon with a wound on its tail patted the water and timidly said, "It's me." The old sea dragon pointed to the others with its fin. "This is Xiaoyu, Xiaofeng, Xiaokai, and Xiaoyan." Emotienga wanted to laugh. The names of these sea dragons were interesting. She couldn't help but ask, "What about you?" The old sea dragon answered, "My name is Xiaoqing." Emotienga had the urge to laugh wildly. Her ancestor, Emo Yaoqing, was really a talent. The old sea dragon sounded like a human old man, but he actually had a name like Xiaoqing. She suppressed her laughter and asked, "Then what's your surname? You're not surnamed Song, are you?" The old sea dragon shook its head. "Our surname is Bai. My name is Bai Xiaoqing." This time, Emotienga not only wanted to laugh wildly, but also wanted to pound the ground. Chapter 338. Sea dragons were actually ferocious-looking sea monsters. They had sharp heads, big mouths, sharp teeth, and the scales on their bodies were as sharp as blades. However, this group of sea dragons actually had the surname Bai, and they even had such a cute name. Emotienga turned her head and held back her laughter for a long time. Then she turned back and said to the old sea dragon, "Help me decide. As long as it's your offspring, I'll take it." The old sea dragon hesitated, then reluctantly looked at the 5 little sea dragons and said to her, "Human, you choose. They're all the same to me. It's hard for me to choose." Upon seeing its expression, Emotienga no longer forced it. She nodded and said, "I'll take this one." The one she picked was the youngest sea dragon, Bai Xiaofan. Seeing that it had been hit, the other 4 sea dragons surrounded it and roared at the same time. They spoke in the language of sea dragons, which Emotienga didn't understand. But from their looks, she could guess that they were very close to each other and were reluctant to part. Seeing this, Emotienga couldn't help but smile. Ever since she entered the cultivation world, she rarely saw such a scene of brotherly affection. Even though they were demonic beasts, they still made her feel warm. The 5 little sea dragons roared for a while, then the old sea dragon roared, and they immediately quieted down. The old sea dragon looked at the little sea dragon called Xiaofan and asked it to swim closer. Then it turned to Emotienga and said, "Okay, human, you can sign a spiritual beast contract with my child." Emotienga looked at the little sea dragon in front of her. Its tail was still injured and it looked at her timidly. She knew that the little sea dragon almost died under her flying sword, so it must be afraid of her. But it didn't matter. As long as they signed a spiritual beast contract, the little sea dragon would trust her. Emotienga closed her eyes and gathered her divine sense. The reason why he chose this little sea dragon was that it was the weakest among all the sea dragons, and its divine sense was also weak, so it would be easier to establish a spirit beast contract. Secondly, it was only 800 years old, but it already had a cultivation of the 5th rank, which showed that it was extremely talented among demonic beasts. Her divine sense came into contact with Bai Xiaofan. Under strong pressure, Bai Xiaofan obediently signed a subordinate contract with Emotienga. From this moment on, Imo was its master. They weren't allowed to hurt each other until their spiritual beast contract was dissolved or until one of them died. Seeing that Imo opened her eyes and the fear in Xiaofan's eyes faded, Old Sea Dragon by Xiaoqing was surprised. So fast. The fact that they finished signing the spiritual beast contract so quickly could only mean that Imo Tiange's divine sense was much stronger than Xiaofan's. Xiaofan was a demonic beast equivalent to a human in the early stage of the core formation realm. Although its divine sense wasn't as good as a human's, it wasn't much weaker. Imo Tiange, on the other hand, was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Imo Tiange smiled and waved at Xiaofan. Xiaofan was still timid, but it was no longer afraid of her. It obediently approached her and said, "Master, we've signed a contract. Can you give the spiritual fruit to my grandfather?" "Of course." Imo Tiange took out a healing medicinal pill and threw it into its mouth. "Wait here for a moment." After that, she touched the space between her eyebrows again. After several breaths, she entered the virtual sky world and took out 200 fruits. "Here, this is for you." Imo Tiange handed them to Old Sea Dragon together with the original one. Seeing the 300 fruits, Old Sea Dragon and the 4 little sea dragons' eyes lit up. Old Sea Dragon carefully took them with his fin. With a flash of white light, the 100 fruits disappeared, hidden somewhere. Demonic beasts didn't have things like chinkuan bags, but they had their own storage space, which was much more convenient than humans. "Okay, I've given you what I promised. Can you tell me the secret now?" Maybe because of the 100 fruits or because Xiaofan had become her spiritual beast, Old Sea Dragon's voice became a little respectful. "I've told Xiaofan about this in detail. It will tell you." Imo Tiange nodded. Xiaofan was now her spiritual beast, so she wasn't worried that this Old Sea Dragon would go back on its word. "Then our deal is complete." Old Sea Dragon didn't answer. He looked at Xiaofan next to her and sighed. Then, the 4 little sea dragons roared again. Xiaofan also roared in response. The 5 little sea dragons gathered together, rubbing their heads against each other and slapping each other with their fins, as if to express their reluctance to part. Imo Tiange smiled and watched them reluctantly say goodbye to each other, but she didn't urge them. After a long time, Old Sea Dragon roared again, interrupting their reluctance to part. Under Old Sea Dragon's scolding, the 4 little sea dragons finally separated from Xiaofan, but they lined up and slapped their tails against the water, as if they were performing some kind of ceremony. Xiaofan looked at them and followed the rhythm, wagging its tail to echo them. After a long time, they stopped. Old Sea Dragon turned his head and said to Imo Tiange, "Okay, human, you can take Xiaofan away." Imo Tiange nodded gently and saluted them to show respect. "Before I pass away, I'll bring Xiaofan back here to reunite with you. If I'm lucky enough to advance to the deification realm, then as long as Xiaofan asks, I'll also terminate the spiritual beast contract and give it back its freedom. I'll take my leave now." Old Sea Dragon floated on the sea with the 4 little sea dragons. He pressed his fins against his chest and bowed his head to her, which seemed to be the etiquette of sea dragons. Under the gazes of 1 old and 4 young sea dragons, Imo Tiange flew to the distant island with Bai Xiaofan and eventually disappeared into the sky. After returning to the island, Imo Tiange took Xiaofan into Imo Yaoqing's cave and treated Xiaofan's wound first. Xiaofan's injury wasn't serious. The sea dragon's armor was very tough, and Imo Tiange wasn't good at using a flying sword. Although her sword had left a wound on its tail, it wasn't to the point where it couldn't move. After taking medicinal pills, the wound quickly healed. Amazing! Xiaofan twisted his head and was stunned to see the wound on his tail disappear. "It's gone so soon." Old Sea Dragon by Xiaoqing's voice sounded like that of a human old man, while Bai Xiaofan was a human teenager whose voice hadn't changed yet. 800 years old was still a child compared to a 10,000-year lifespan. Imo Tiange asked with a smile, "You don't have medicinal pills. What will you do if you're injured?" Xiaofan said, "We also have healing herbs at the bottom of the sea, but the effect isn't very good. They're also healing spells. Master, I heard that you humans can concoct medicinal pills. These medicinal pills are magical and can help you advance quickly. Is that true? Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. It's not that magical. It's just that your cultivation will be faster and your advancement will be easier. Wow, it's much better than us demonic beasts. Xiaofan's voice was very happy and it looked at her longingly. Master, will I also have medicinal pills to eat in the future? Of course. Mo Tiange reached out and touched its ferocious-looking head. You're my spiritual beast, so of course I'll give you medicinal pills. Then she smiled. By the way, I haven't asked you yet. Does it matter if you leave the water? Sea dragons were demonic beasts in the sea. Naturally, they could exert their greatest strength in the sea. However, if their spells had taken shape, it wouldn't affect their strength. It doesn't matter, Xiaofan answered. Our sea dragon clan spells are innate. Besides, I'm already in the 5th rank, so I can survive without relying on water. As it spoke, it rubbed its head. Besides, Grandpa has taught me everything. I'm very smart, so I remember everything. There was a trace of pride in its voice, as if a child was saying, praise me quickly. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh and stroked its head. You're really so smart. Do you remember all the secrets your grandpa told you? Of course. Xiaofan raised its head without hesitation. Mo Tiange laughed even more happily. She stroked its head again and said, okay, you're my spiritual beast now. I'll take you to a good place. Xiaofan blinked its eyes and looked at her with confusion. Mo Tiange didn't talk nonsense anymore. She held Xiaofan's head with one hand and touched the space between her eyebrows with the other. A bead emerged and she cast an art on it. After several breaths, the two of them appeared in the virtual sky world. Woo-woo! As soon as they entered, a golden shadow rushed over and threw itself into Mo Tiange's arms. It was Feifei. She just entered the virtual sky world twice, but she didn't have time to pay attention to it, so it was very depressed. Mo Tiange patted its head and comforted it. Good Feifei, are you bored? Let Xiaohua play with you for a while, okay? And I have a new friend. Xiaofan was now staring at the surrounding environment with its slender eyes in surprise. It didn't understand how it changed here in an instant, and this space was so rich in spiritual aura. It couldn't help but think that human spells were so magical. This is Xiaofan and this is Feifei. Being pulled by Mo Tiange, Xiaofan regained its senses and stared at the leopard's-like golden furry ball in front of it. It blinked, not understanding what this thing was. However, for demonic beasts, not their own race usually meant hunting. Therefore, it jumped up and floated in the air, baring its sharp teeth at Feifei. Although Feifei had been with Mo Tiange for 60 years and had eaten a lot of spiritual plants, perhaps because of the characteristics of its race, it had always been difficult to advance and was still in the 4th rank. For demonic beasts, the gap between the 4th rank and the 5th rank was very big. In particular, Feifei wasn't good at fights of magical powers. As long as Xiaofan casually waved its fins or tail, Feifei wouldn't be able to resist. The two demonic beasts stared at each other. Seeing Xiaofan's fierce eyes, Feifei suddenly stretched out its claws. A white light flashed on its claws and it touched Xiaofan's green scales. In the white light, the fierce light in Xiaofan's eyes gradually dissipated. Although it wasn't her first time seeing it, Mo Tiange still felt it was very magical. Sure enough, Feifei was a magical demonic beast. It was born to live in peace with many demonic beasts, which was an anomaly in the world of demonic beasts. Patting Feifei's head, Mo Tiange released Xiaohua, who had been staying in her spiritual beast bag. You two go play first. Xiaohua, who had just come out of the spiritual beast bag, also showed hostility to Xiaofan, but under Mo Tiange's divine comprehension order, it was quickly pulled away by Feifei to play. Xiaofan, why didn't you attack Feifei just now? Xiaofan's voice was a little confused. I felt that it wasn't dangerous, Mo Tiange nodded. Sure enough, Feifei's special ability was like this. She took a few steps forward and waved her hand. Can you adapt to the spiritual aura here? Xiaofan nodded. And the spiritual aura here is very comfortable. At that moment, its eyes lit up when it saw a large medicinal field. Master, that's Emotienga stood by the stream, pointed at the large medicinal field and said with a smile, "You're already my spiritual beast. You can eat those spiritual plants if you want, but you have to be sure that they're not harmful to you. From now on, this stream is yours. Get along well with Xiaohua and Feifei. They're also my spiritual beasts, understand?"
Yes, master.
Chapter 339. Among the 3 spiritual beasts, Xiaohua and Xiaofan were in the 5th rank, while Feifei was in the 4th rank. Xiaohua was good at fire techniques and possessed Sun Real Fire, which was very powerful. Xiaofan was good at water techniques and grew up in the harsh environment of the sea, so it had a stronger combat power. Although Feifei wasn't strong, it had a special ability to calm people. These 3 spiritual beasts improved Emotienga's strength a lot. She dared to say that there weren't many core formation cultivators in Kunwu who had 2 5th-rank spiritual beasts like her. Spiritual beasts were very difficult to raise. Although there were many cultivators in Kunwu who raised spiritual beasts, they basically couldn't keep up with their cultivation levels. After all, corresponding to their long lifespans, spiritual beasts' cultivation speed was also very slow. Without enough medicinal pills for them to eat, they couldn't keep up with cultivators' cultivation levels at all if they cultivated by themselves. If there were medicinal pills, which cultivator didn't give them to themselves first? Even Lord Daoist Jinghe and Qin she couldn't. Lord Daoist Jinghe had a spiritual beast institute, but the highest spiritual beast in it was only in the 7th rank and hadn't reached the 8th rank yet. Qin she raised a Chongming bird, which was only in the 5th rank. Because it couldn't keep up with his cultivation level, he usually didn't take it with him. As far as Emotienga knew, only Spiritual Beast Sect, one of the 7 great cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole, had spiritual beasts that weren't inferior to cultivators. However, their cultivation technique was special, so they had to start raising spiritual beasts with spiritual beast eggs. Spiritual beast eggs were rare treasures, and each person only had one. Therefore, under normal circumstances, there would only be one spiritual beast that truly recognized its master. But Emotienga, who had just broken through to the middle stage of the core formation realm, already had 2 5th-rank spiritual beasts. In other words, her fighting strength was equivalent to that of 2 people. Emotienga pondered in her heart for a moment before a smile appeared on her face. With these 2 5th-rank demonic beasts, even if she was alone now, she shouldn't be in too much danger. With that thought, she called Xiaofan with her divine comprehension. Xiaofan quickly flew into the bamboo house, still dripping water. It was very happy in the creek outside the house. Although it had no companions, the spiritual aura in the creek was very rich, so it cultivated very quickly. Moreover, there were countless spiritual herbs waiting for it to eat. "Master, you called me?" Seeing Xiaofan's sharp teeth and hearing its crisp voice, Emotienga couldn't help but smile. "Are your injuries healed?" "Yes." Yifan wiped her dripping body with her fins. Instead of landing, she floated in the air. He was a sea beast. Landing on the ground was far less comfortable than floating in the air. "Then, tell me the secret that your grandfather told you." "All right." Lil Fan also had a spirit beast contract, so he was much more obedient than Xiaohua and Feifei. Usually, he was either cultivating in the stream or drooling while looking at those spirit grasses. Occasionally, he would communicate with Xiaohua and Feifei. Aside from that, no matter what Emotienga said, she always complied without any objections, unlike Feifei and Xiaohua, who occasionally came to disturb her. Grandpa said that in about a month's flight to the south of this small island, there will be a large island. There's a volcano on that big island, and the inside of the volcano is empty. You can reach a very, very deep place along the volcano. Then you can go underground and walk to the end, and you can get out from a hot spring. That's Yunzhong's South Pole Island. Your grandfather didn't tell you the exact location? Emotienga frowned. The sea was so big, and flying in a certain direction was bound to have some deviations. It wouldn't be easy to find this large island. She regretted asking the old sea dragon to lead the way. "Master, don't worry." Sensing her mood, Yifan proudly raised his head. "We sea beasts have our own way of finding the way in the sea. Grandpa told me so I can take you there. Oh. Hearing Yifun's words, Imo Tiange relaxed her brows. That's good. After a pause, she asked, is that road safe? Are there demonic beasts or dangers? Grandpa said that this road was accidentally discovered by my master. It's very dark inside, but there's no danger. Imo Tiange nodded and patted Yifun's head. Go back and continue your cultivation. I'll call you when I need you. Yes, Yifun answered obediently, wagged his tail, and flew back to the stream. Imo Tiange sat cross-legged on the rush cushion, lost in thought. If she was asked if she wanted to go to Yunzhong, the answer would be yes. Through Imo Yaoqing's records, she knew that Yunzhong was such a prosperous cultivation world, so how could she not yearn for it? Her talent was already high enough. Spirit stones, offerings from the elders of Xianxia School and Bishuan Court, plus the harvest from the trip to Demonic Mountain, she had an amazing amount of spirit stones. Medicinal pills, at least before she reached the nascent soul realm, and it wasn't like she didn't have medicinal pills after that. Apart from that, what else did she not have? That was experience, a wealth of experience, and a broad horizon. She wanted to see what other continents were like. She wanted to know if Confucian and Buddhist cultivators were the same as Dao cultivators like them. She also wanted to know everything Imo Yaoqing had faced. She couldn't suppress this desire because she knew that this was what she lacked the most on her path of cultivation. However, leaving the celestial pole to go to Yunzhong wasn't a simple matter, even if she knew the exact safe route. First, it was too far, and second, it would take too long. Both were prone to accidents. She even considered going to Yunzhong after returning to Xianxia School and waiting for Qin Shi to come out of his closed-door meditation. However, this would take at least 10 or 20 years. 10 or 20 years wasn't a long time for nascent soul cultivators and even core formation cultivators, but if she wanted to catch up with Qin Shi, she had to make good use of her time. She had just advanced, so she needed to travel to strengthen her mental state before she could continue her closed-door meditation. It was definitely unwise to enter closed-door meditation now. After thinking for a while, Imo Tiange finally decided that she would go to Yunzhong now, alone. Of course, before that she still had to arrange a lot of things. After all, going to such a far place like Yunzhong would take about a year on the road, and it might take more than 10 years to finish the trip. During this time, Qin Shi and Lord Daoist Jinghe would both be in closed-door meditation, so to avoid accidents, she had to leave some spiritual plants for them. After making her decision, Imo Tiange quickly put it into action. First, she planned to return to Linhai. Although it took several months to find this place, it only took 1 month to return. Because those months were spent searching, she often went the wrong way, but this time, she had the exact route. After returning to Linhai, Imo Tiange rested for a while, then went back to Kunwo through Bishuan Court's transporting formation. She then traveled day and night back to Xianxia School. When she finally returned to Xianxia School, the first thing she did was to see Qin Shi. Although he was in closed-door meditation, Qin Shi only wanted to stabilize his realm this time, so he didn't need to pay too much attention to it. Imo Tiange only touched the restrictions outside, so he stopped cultivating and opened the door of the closed-door meditation room. Why did it take you so long to come back? Qin Shi smiled when he saw her. Imo Tiange walked towards him, and the two of them naturally hugged. It feels like a long time, she said with a sigh, although it hasn't even been a year. Qin Shi also felt this way, so he didn't say anything and just hugged her even tighter. After a while, the two of them had enough hugging and separated slightly. Qin Shi asked with a smile, "You advanced to the middle stage. It seems your trip was very fruitful. Where did you go?" Imo Tiange leaned against him, laid down, and leaned her head on his lap. She then tilted her head to look at him. "Guess." "That I can't guess." Qin Shi fiddled with her hair, his gaze gentle. "But seeing you so happy, it must be a good thing, right?" "Of course." Imo Tiange smiled proudly and no longer hid anything. She told him in detail about her experiences in the past year. Qin Shi listened very carefully. When Imo Tiange said there was a passage between the celestial pole and Yunzhong, his pupils shrank and he said keenly, "Yunzhong? You want to go to Yunzhong?" The two of them had similar characters and lived together for more than 10 years, so they had a tacit understanding. Mo Tiange wasn't surprised that he guessed her intentions at all. She nodded. Yes, I want to go to Yunzhong. The cultivators in the celestial pole are all trapped on the spirit vein in Kunwu, so I want to go to Yunzhong to see the wider world. She didn't say anything, but his expression was very solemn. Mo Tiange's expression also became serious. She straightened up and asked, "What's wrong? Is it inappropriate?" She breathed a sigh of relief, held her in his arms, and said with a sigh, "It's just that I can't go with you right now." He just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so stabilizing his realm was the most important thing. I know. Mo Tiange paused for a moment but still said, "So I decided to go alone." The hand holding her froze. After a while, she let go of her and looked straight into her eyes. "Are you sure?" Mo Tiange nodded. "I'm not a troublemaker. You know this. My current strength is enough to protect myself. There won't be a problem for me to go to Yunzhong alone." She frowned and didn't say anything for a long time. This matter was too important. Although he had slowly accepted Mo Tiange's idea and was willing to let her travel alone, going to Yunzhong was still too dangerous. Mo Tiange also didn't say anything. It wasn't that she didn't know what she was thinking, but she had to take she's opinion into consideration for such an important matter. "Is there a way to compromise?" After a long time, she said, "I won't stop you if you want to go to Yunzhong, but I won't feel at ease letting you go alone like this. It's too far, and if something happens, I won't be able to save you in time." Mo Tiange thought for a while and said hesitantly, "How about I draw a map for you and you come out of closed-door meditation to find me?" She didn't say anything. Mo Tiange scratched her head, feeling a bit distressed. "You can't come out of closed-door meditation now, and I can't wait. Do you still not trust me to protect myself?" She's gaze softened. He looked at her and said gently, "It's not that I don't trust you, but I'm too worried. I know you can protect yourself, but in any case, I'll be worried if you're not by my side." This time, Mo Tiange didn't say anything. She was very touched. After a while, she said, "How about I ask Master?" She thought about it and nodded. "That's fine. Master should give us good advice." Chapter 340. A year passed, but Lord Daoist Jinghan never left his immortal's cave. According to the maids, Grandmaster didn't even make a sound this whole year. The closed-door meditation room had always been quiet. When Shi and Mo Tiange heard this, they glanced at each other in astonishment. It wasn't that he was surprised that his master's injuries were so serious, but that he actually held himself back for so long without speaking. It was really not easy. The two of them went to the closed-door meditation room together. After she made a set of hand seals, Lord Daoist Jinghe's voice rang out. "Tiange, what's the matter?" Before entering closed-door meditation this time, Lord Daoist Jinghe once said he wouldn't come out within 10 years. It had only been a year now. Shi raised his voice and said, "Master, we have something we want to ask for your opinion on." There was no more sound coming from the room. After a while, the stone door slowly opened. After the two of them entered, the stone door closed. When Mo Tiange saw Lord Daoist Jinghe sitting cross-legged, regulating his breath and healing his injuries, his complexion looked a lot better. At the very least, he no longer looked old. She felt a little more at ease. From the looks of it, her master's injuries were much better. "Master, how are your injuries?" Lord Daoist Jinghe opened his eyes. When he saw them, he smiled and said, "Fortunately, you guys brought back those spiritual panaceas. Master's injuries are much better now. Moreover, maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise." Mo Tiange and Shi were bewildered. They glanced at each other and simultaneously thought of a possibility. They were both pleasantly surprised. "Master, you have a chance to make a realm breakthrough?" Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded. Although his appearance hadn't recovered yet, his expression was beaming with joy like before. "Not bad. In this 1 year of closed-door meditation to heal my injuries, I've already comprehended something. The late stage of the nascent soul realm isn't like before, where there was an insurmountable gap. This was a pleasant surprise. Both Xianxia and Imotienga were overjoyed. They said in unison, "Congratulations, Master." Lord Daoist Jinghe waved his hand and restrained himself a little. "It's just a possibility. It'll take at least 20 to 30 years to heal my injuries, let alone make a realm breakthrough." Right after he finished speaking, he asked them, "Since you came here, what do you want to ask?" "Master, according to your suggestion, I entered closed-door meditation a year ago, while Tienga went out for a walk. Soon after, the two of them roughly recounted Mo Tienga's experiences in the past year. After Lord Daoist Jinghe listened, he first probed Mo Tienga's cultivation level, then praised her. Not bad. Although you've just advanced to the middle stage, your spiritual aura is very stable. The two of you dual cultivating is indeed a match made in heaven." Speaking of dual cultivation, Mo Tienga was still a bit embarrassed, so she immediately changed the subject. "Master, give me some advice. What should we do now?" "What should we do?" Lord Daoist Jinghe was flabbergasted. "What should we do is naturally up to you. Why are you asking me?" "Master." Mo Tienga's eyes widened. "We came to ask for your opinion." Lord Daoist Jinghe spread his hands and said, "My opinion is that you guys should do as you see fit." Mo Tienga and Xianxia were both speechless. After thinking for a while, Xianxia said, "Master, I think it's too dangerous to let Tienga go to Yunzhong alone. What do you think?" "Danger?" Lord Daoist Jinghe's gaze lingered on Mo Tienga for a while before he finally looked at Xianxia. "When you were in the middle stage of the core formation realm, did Master ever stop you from doing what you wanted to do?" Xianxia blushed and answered, "No. In fact, after he formed his gold core, he rarely stayed in the sect except for closed-door meditation. He often went out for several years at a time, but he felt it was different, so he emphasized, 'But she's going to Yunzhong.'" Lord Daoist Jinghe curled his lips. "So what if it's Yunzhong? Is it different from the celestial pole? Are there high-level cultivators all over the streets? Or are core formation cultivators especially good at fighting?" Xianxia was completely speechless. Mo Tienga asked happily, "Master, you don't object?" Right after she finished talking about Xianxia, Lord Daoist Jinghe turned around and glared at her. "You want to go to such a distant place? Have you prepared everything? Have you arranged everything? What about the plan?" Mo Tienga was embarrassed by the three questions. She said, "Aren't I asking for your opinion? If I'm sure I'll go, of course I'll arrange everything." "Oomph." Lord Daoist Jinghe said rudely, "That's what you say, but the two of you are the same. You've already made a decision, so why are you asking? Don't you just want me to help you persuade someone?" Mo Tienga was also completely speechless. "You came to disturb my closed-door meditation for this kind of thing? Are you bored? Both of you, get out. Just tell me if you want to go or not. How old are you?" In Lord Daoist Jinghe's complaints, the two of them were kicked out of the closed-door meditation room. After they left the closed-door meditation room, the stone door behind them shut them out. Xianxia and Mo Tienga looked at each other and saw helplessness in each other's eyes. They had no choice but to go back first. They returned to their cave in silence, each with their own thoughts. As soon as they opened the stone door, Yizhenji's cheerful voice came immediately. "Andy Master, you're back." Mo Tienga forced a smile, but when she looked up, she was stunned. A foundation-building female disciple was standing next to Yizhenji. She was dressed in Shenqing School's robe, looking plain and gentle. Although she wasn't stunningly beautiful, she could still make people's eyes light up. When the woman saw them, she bowed and said, "Grandmaster Shoujing, Martial Uncle Qingwei." Mo Tienga recognized the voice as soon as she heard it. It was Shui Linbua. Judging from her appearance, her injuries had healed? "No need to be so polite," Xianxia replied faintly, then he looked at Yizhenji. "Are you going to move back?" Yizhenji looked at them and scratched his head a little embarrassedly. "Master, wasn't this a joke that he had been living with Linbua in Mingxin residence?" Mo Tienga knew he was thin-skinned, so she glared at Xianxia and said with a smile, "Linbua's injuries have healed?" Upon hearing that, Shui Linbo stepped forward and saluted again. Thank you for your kindness, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Thanks to you, disciples' injuries have healed a lot. Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. Shui Linbo's behavior was well-mannered, and she looked much more mature than Yi Zhenji. Auntie, Yi Zhenji said with a smile, you've been out for a long time. I haven't congratulated you on your realm breakthrough. Mo Tiange smiled. You've made progress in your cultivation recently, but you still have to work hard. You've been in the middle stage of the foundation building realm for so long, so you should think of a way to advance to the late stage. Then I know. I've been cultivating hard. Don't worry, Auntie. After encouraging them with a few more words, Mo Tiange said, Zhenji, your master and I have something to do. You can go ahead. Oh, okay, Yi Zhenji answered, watched the two of them go back to the cultivation room, and closed the stone door. Upon seeing them, Mo Tiange remembered to ask, has Shui Linbo's injuries healed? More or less. Qin she didn't care much. I heard from Zhenji that martial nephew Han Ruo of Seoul's Retreat Peak has excellent medical skills. I don't know what method he used to repair her dantian, but she's been feeling better these days and can come out and walk around. Han Ruo was Kuang Zhu's Daoist name, but Mo Tiange felt that Kuang Zhu's real name was the most suitable for that senior martial brother. Speaking of this, Qin she asked again, what do you think about this Shui Linbo? Mo Tiange was stunned and asked, what do I think? Zhenji likes her, so what do you want me to think? Don't you like her and want to take her as your disciple? Oh, about that. Mo Tiange remembered what she said. After thinking for a moment, she said, even if I want to take her as my disciple, it's not the right time to leave now. Besides, if I take her as my disciple, it'll be like reaching the sky in a single bound for her. It might even affect her cultivation, so it's better to let her grow up first. What you said makes sense. Qin she thought for a moment and agreed with her. Seriously speaking, she's a talented person. Since she's better, she often comes to help Zhenji manage the cave. I can see that she's steadier than Zhenji, but I don't trust her completely, so I can't entrust some things to her. Speaking of this, Mo Tiange said with a smile, when I went to Linhai this time, I took the opportunity to inquire about her. What she said was true, and her background wasn't fake. Of course, even if we want to cultivate her, I think we should take it slow. She's not a formal disciple of the sect. If she reaches the sky in a single bound, it'll be inconvenient for her to make friends with other disciples. You're right. Qin she agreed. In that case, when she recovers, we'll let her choose another cave and put her in the register like ordinary disciples. However, we can record her in the steward's hall and let her work here. If she's really reliable and worth cultivating, we'll naturally accept her as a disciple. That way, with her reminders from time to time, we won't have to worry about Zhenji. Moreover, we can also concentrate on our cultivation if we have a disciple to do things for us in the future. Mo Tiange thought about it and felt his idea was good, so she had no objection. Then let's do that. In Xianxing school, after becoming a core formation cultivator, people rarely appeared in front of others, and all matters were handled by disciples. There were very few people like Mo Tiange and Qin Shi. Yi Zhenji was Qin Shi's only disciple, so Mo Tiange didn't have time to accept him. Now, the two of them should consider this matter. Otherwise, it would be very inconvenient to have no trusted disciples in the school. After they finished talking about this, the two of them were silent for a while. After a while, they opened their mouths at the same time. But seeing that Mo Tiange also wanted to say something, they shut their mouths. The two of them looked at each other for a while. Mo Tiange coughed and said, about that matter, do you agree? After going around in circles, they finally reached the point. Qin Shi was silent for a while before he sighed. I know. In fact, Master still spoke for you, but Master also scolded me, Mo Tiange muttered. That's true, but... Qin Shi smiled bitterly. Alright, going to Yunzhong isn't a big deal. You're already a core formation cultivator, so you can deal with many things by yourself. He recalled that after he formed his gold core, he dared to go to any dangerous place. It was also those experiences that made him grow up quickly. Thinking about it this way, it was good for Mo Tiange to travel more. He didn't have any objection, but Imotienga actually felt embarrassed. She thought for a while then said, "How about this? I'll leave the specific route to you. If I don't come back and you're worried, you can come to me, N." She answered softly then said, "Don't forget Wanderer Ziwei's request. These days, the steward's hall has been helping you find clues. When there are clues, I'll accompany you to finish this matter. I'll remember." Chapter 341. Since she was determined to go to Yunzhong, Imotienga was busy these days. First of all, she had to refine the magic weapons she got from Imo Yaoqing's cave one by one so that she could fight with ease. Second, she had to leave enough medicinal pills for Qin Shi and Lord Daoist Jinghe for emergencies. Finally, she had to learn about Yunzhong as much as possible. Qin Shi paused his closed-door meditation to look for records about Yunzhong. To his surprise, Lord Daoist Jinyang actually knew something about Yunzhong. "You want to go to Yunzhong?" Lord Daoist Jinyang was quite surprised to hear him ask about Yunzhong. "Well," Qin Shi paused and said frankly, "Tienga wants to go to Yunzhong." Lord Daoist Jinyang was puzzled. "It's not easy to go to Yunzhong. The South Sea is very dangerous. Even nascent soul cultivators can't cross the South Sea easily, let alone a core formation cultivator. Your master also knows about this, so why didn't he stop her?" "Qin," she said with a smile, "Tienga found a way to get there safely from the East Sea." "Is that so?" Lord Daoist Jinyang was even more surprised. After thinking about it, he was very happy. "This is good. Yunzhong is a holy land for cultivation. If she can travel there, she'll definitely gain something. By the way, if she's sure this way is safe, we can let all the core formation cultivators in the school go there to gain experience and communicate with the cultivators in Yunzhong. Also, it's said that Yunzhong is very rich in cultivation resources. If Qingwei goes there, she can exchange some rare treasures in Kunwu with them. And this is a good way to make money." In the end, Lord Daoist Jinyang began to calculate how much profit this way could bring. If they could bring some of Kunwu's specialties to Yunzhong and exchange them for rare treasures in Kunwu, Xianxia School could gain a lot from it. With resources, he would be able to cultivate another batch of disciples. Qin Shi was helpless to see him like this. Although this senior martial brother Jinyang was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, he was responsible for the school and was always very enthusiastic about these things. "Senior martial brother Jinyang, it seems you know about Yunzhong's situation?" His attention was drawn back. Lord Daoist Jinyang stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Although we don't have much contact with Yunzhong across the South Sea, occasionally, Yunzhong cultivators accidentally come to the Celestial Pole. In the past, I met a cultivator from Yunzhong and heard some things about Yunzhong from him." "Oh, how long ago was that? What was the cultivation level of this cultivator? Is he from the South Sea?" "Oh, it's been 500 or 600 years. Lord Daoist Jinyang recalled. "At that time, I was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, and I met a cultivator in the same realm as me by chance. He was also in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, and his means were very powerful. We had a fight, but it ended in a draw, so we admired each other and became good friends. He did come here via the South Sea. According to him, the South Sea is very dangerous and there are many high-level sea beasts there. He was lucky and managed to escape every time. Even so, it took him 2 years to reach the Celestial Pole. An early-stage nascent soul cultivator can cross the South Sea?" Qin Shi was quite astonished. Wasn't it said that even late-stage nascent soul cultivators were likely to lament their inadequacy? Upon seeing Qin Shi's expression, Lord Daoist Jinyang chuckled and said, "Don't think he's ordinary. I can't say much about other things, but this person's escaping skills are top-notch. I dare say that even cultivators in the late nascent soul stage wouldn't be able to stop him. Even so, he had almost died in the South Sea despite his abilities. Therefore, if Qingwei really found a safe path, it'll be extremely beneficial to our entire sect." Qin Shi wasn't interested in this matter, so he just asked, "Senior martial brother Jinyang, can you tell me what's the situation in Yunzhong?" "About that?" Lord Daoist Xianxia recalled and said slowly, the spirit veins in Yunzhong are very widely distributed, so there are a lot of cultivators. In addition to Dao cultivators, there are also Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, demon cultivators, and devil cultivators. Among them, Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism are called the righteous path, while demons and devils are called the evil path. Of course, the so-called righteous path and evil path are equivalent to our classification of righteous path and devil path. It's not that the righteous path is justice and the evil path is evil. Their righteous path and evil path are all mixed together, and there are very few disputes. She patiently listened to Lord Daoist Xianxia for a long time, but in the end, it was all things recorded on Mo Yaoqing's jade slip. Taking advantage of Lord Daoist Xianxia's recollection, she hurriedly asked, Senior Martial Brother Xianxia, is there anything I need to pay attention to in Yunzhong? These things aren't important. About that? Lord Daoist Xianxia thought for a moment then said, it's nothing, but let Qingwei pay attention to one thing. The fighting methods of the cultivators in Yunzhong are different from those in the Celestial Pole, so before you get familiar with them, don't easily fight with others. Oh. Xi's interest was piqued. What's the difference? Lord Daoist Xianxia said, it's a bit complicated. First, their magic weapons focus on speed, so you must be careful not to be preemptively attacked by others. Second, they have many magic weapons that can interfere with the operation of other people's spiritual aura. If you don't pay attention, it's easy to fall into their trap. This was something Mo Yaoqing didn't explain in detail, but it was very helpful to Mo Tiange. When Lord Daoist Xianxia finished, before leaving, she asked again, Senior Martial Brother Xianxia, what happened to the cultivator in Yunzhong who came to the Celestial Pole? Lord Daoist Xianxia was stunned, then he answered, he stayed in the Celestial Pole for several years, but in the end he still wanted to return to Yunzhong. After he left, we haven't heard any news about him. Maybe he died in the South Sea, or maybe he safely returned to Yunzhong. She was silent, then he sighed and stood up. Thank you for telling me this, Senior Martial Brother Xianxia. I'll tell Tiange about many things, so I'll go back first. Hey Shoujing. Lord Daoist Xianxia shouted behind him, remember to let Qingwei pay more attention to any special spiritual objects that can be exchanged. Mo Tiange was cleaning the virtual sky world. Even if there were jade boxes, spiritual talismans, and other things that could seal the spiritual aura of 10,000-year-old spiritual plants would always lose their spiritual nature after being stored for a long time, and they could be stored longer if they were refined into medicinal pills. During the 10 years she and Qin were trapped in the virtual sky world, they refined a lot of medicinal pills, and most of them could be kept. In addition, Qin prepared a lot of things for her. Although most of them were useless, they were his kind intentions, so she accepted them all. In fact, she had a purpose for going to Yunzhong that she didn't tell them. Mo Yaoqing once said that her art of Sunu came from Danxia sect, and the art of Sunu in Danxia sect even included the parts above the nascent soul realm. If she had a chance, she wanted to get that cultivation technique from Danxia sect and compare it with her own. Maybe it would give her some inspiration. Of course, this was just in passing. If it was difficult to achieve her purpose, she wouldn't force it. While she was cleaning, she heard Qin calling her from outside. Tiange? She opened the virtual sky world and Qin came in. Thinking about this virtual sky world, she could clearly feel that her virtual sky world wasn't as profound as Zhong Muling's. Was it because her realm wasn't high enough? What? Are you all ready? Qin looked at the bottles and jars on the floor. What are these for? For you and Master. Mo Tiange counted them one by one. These are for Master, these are for you, and these are for Jinji. As for this box, it's for spiritual beasts, so I'll give it to you. Qin looked at these things and was stunned. So many? Not only did they cover the whole table, but there were also a lot of them on the floor. These medicinal pills would probably last them for 100 years. Mo Tiange said, these are the finished products we concocted last time. I've kept the medicinal pills for the core formation realm, and the rest are for you. Qin thought for a moment. He and his master were in the nascent soul realm, and Xinji was in the foundation building realm, so they just happened to be in the nascent soul realm. It wouldn't affect her, so he said, "All right, I'll take these out later. By the way, I went to ask senior martial brother Xinjiang just now. He told me to tell you something." After listening to Qin repeat what Lord Daoist Xinjiang said, she felt helpless. Why is martial uncle Xinjiang so wordy? It's not like I'm going there to do business. She understood her mood very well. He said with a smile, "He's the head Grand Supreme Elder, so of course the things he thinks about are different from us. You should listen to him a little." Mo Tiange also knew that as a sect elder, she naturally had to think about things that were beneficial to Xianxia school. After tidying up everything, she said, "Okay, pack up your things and go out." When the two of them came out of the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange called Yi Jinji and Shui Linbo over. "Andy Master. Greetings to Grandmaster Shoujing, Martial Uncle Qingwei." "No need to be so polite." Mo Tiange looked up. Shui Linbo was still as steady and well-mannered as an ordinary disciple. She didn't seem complacent because of her relationship with Jinji. She nodded secretly. If Shui Linbo treated people like this, it would make up for Jinji's shortcomings, and she could do things at ease in the future. "Auntie, Master, why did you call us here?" Yi Jinji couldn't help but ask cautiously when he saw their serious expressions. She glanced at him and said, "Your aunt has to go out for a while. It may take a long time, so I called you here to tell you something." "Huh?" Yi Jinji looked at Mo Tiange. "Auntie, are you going out to do something? Or travel?" "I'm going out to travel." Mo Tiange said with a smile, "You don't have to worry too much about it. It's just that this time I may be out for a long time." "But, Auntie, didn't you just come back?" Yi Jinji was puzzled. "You guys didn't return for 10 years, and it's only been 2 years since you came back, but Auntie went out again. This time, it's only been a month. Auntie, is there something important for you to go out so frequently?" She couldn't explain it clearly in a short time, so Mo Tiange didn't explain in detail. She just said, "There's something, but it's not a big deal. Jinji, Auntie may be away for a few years to more than 10 years this time. During this time, your master has to enter closed-door meditation to stabilize his realm, and your grandmaster happens to be healing his injuries, so you have to rely on yourself for cultivation." "Don't worry, Auntie," Yi Jinji said. "I'll do as I see fit. If there's anything I don't understand, I can communicate with my fellow martial brothers. If I still don't understand, I can ask Martial Uncle Mingjin. When you're not here, I'll take good care of the cave." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile and turned to Shui Linbo. "Linbo, I've discussed it with your Grandmaster Shoujing. After you recover from your injuries, go to the Steward's Hall to register and officially belong to my Clear Spring Peak. In addition, while your Grandmaster Shoujing is in closed-door meditation, you'll help Jinji take care of the cave. You can inform the Steward's Hall about this." Upon hearing this, Shui Linbo was overjoyed and excitedly bowed to express her gratitude. "Thank you, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Thank you, Grandmaster Shoujing. I'll do my best." Mo Tiange smiled. Shui Linbo was a smart person and knew they were giving her a chance. As long as she seized the opportunity, she would be a real talent and they wouldn't treat her unfairly in the future. Chapter 342. Several days later, 2 escape lights rose from Clear Spring Peak. After a short pause, the white one flew over Mount Taikong and disappeared into the sky. The red streak remained in midair and did not move for a long time. After a while, Qin sighed softly. He looked at the empty sky, waved his sleeves, and landed. Since Mo Tiange was gone, he should continue his closed-door meditation. He knew very well that as a cultivator, this kind of separation was normal, so he just suppressed the slight reluctance in his heart and calmly returned to his cave. "Master!" Yi Jinji greeted him. Qin smiled. "Go cultivate. Your aunt is not here, so you have to be more serious, understand?" Yi Jinji smiled. "Master, don't worry. I'm not a child anymore. I know these things." Qin was stunned. Thinking of this child's performance in the past 3 years, He also smiled. After all, you've gone through experience. You're different now. He walked into his closed-door meditation room with his hands behind his back and said, I won't come out for 10 years, so I'll leave the cave to you. Don't disturb me unless it's urgent. Got it, master. Xianxia traveled at a moderate pace. Half a month later, she appeared in Linhai again. This time, she already had a goal, so she just greeted Wei Haolan and went out of the sea along the familiar route. As soon as Xiaofan was in the sea, it became very excited and happily flopped in the sea. Although there was water in the virtual sky world, the stream wasn't the sea, and it was a sea beast that lived in the sea since it was a child. Xianxia smiled as she watched it swim round and round. Finally, it returned to her side, raised its head and said, Master, where are we going? To the place your grandfather said, she said, but you're not familiar with this place, so come back first. I'll take you flying. No need. Xiaofan flicked its tail, jumped from the water flexibly, and made a beautiful arc. This is the sea. We sea dragons can smell the sea, so we won't get lost in the sea. Xianxia was stunned. You've never been here. It's so far from where you live. Can you swim back? Yes. Yifan nodded seriously. Master, don't worry. This is the instinct of us sea dragons. As it spoke, it looked at her pitifully. Master, can you sit on me and I'll swim you to the destination? I want to swim. Faced with such a pleading gaze, what else could Xianxia say? She looked down and saw that its injury had healed. Its tail was strong and flexible. The strength of that swing just now could probably crack a stone. Of course, it would not be a problem for her to sit on it. All right, let me know if you're tired. Yes. Yifan jumped up happily and fell back into the water. She said hurriedly, Master, come up quickly. We'll leave now. Upon seeing its impatient appearance, Xianxia couldn't help but smile. She cast a simple water-repelling art, then sat on Xiaofan's back and let it lead the way. Xiaofan's body was more than 10 feet long, its tail was flexible, and its fins were powerful. In the sea, it was like an arrow leaving the bow. Although its speed was not as fast as her escape light, it was not much slower. In the beginning, Xianxia still compared the route she had corrected to see if she was swimming in the right direction. Later, she found that Xiaofan's sense of direction in the sea was extremely accurate, so she no longer paid attention to it. Instead, she used the time on the road to study Yaoqing's cultivation experience. One person and one beast swam leisurely to the depths of the East Sea. In the coastal waters, there were only some low-rank sea beasts. When those sea beasts saw the 5th-rank Xiaofan, they naturally didn't dare to approach. As they went deeper and deeper into the East Sea, although some high-level sea beasts appeared occasionally, they didn't dare to approach Xianxia because of her powerful momentum. A 6th-rank person and a 5th-rank sea dragon, ordinary sea beasts couldn't afford to provoke them. 2 months later, when Xianxia felt the pressure of a 7th-rank sea beast, she reluctantly put Xiaofan into the spiritual beast bag and flew high in the sky with her cloud-treading boots. The deeper they went, the higher the rank of the sea beasts. This time, she had a clear goal. It was better to avoid these sea beasts. When the aura of the 7th-rank sea beast disappeared, Xianxia released Xiaofan and asked, Xiaofan, can you point the way if we're not in the sea? Xiaofan floated in the air and nodded. I can, but it'll be a little slow. And that's good. It didn't matter if it was a little slow, but the most important thing was safety. If Xiaofan swam in the sea, the human cultivator's aura would probably alarm those high-level demonic beasts, and a fierce battle would be inevitable. If they flew in the air, as long as they were high enough, those demonic beasts wouldn't be able to sense them accurately, and they generally wouldn't act rashly. The boring journey lasted for 4 months. The 1 month the old sea dragon said was Yaoqing's speed. When they arrived in the celestial pole, Yaoqing was already a nascent soul cultivator. Even if they just traveled leisurely, her speed was much faster than Xianxia's. For months later, seeing that there were more and more high-level sea beasts around, Xianxia finally found the big island with the volcano. She breathed a sigh of relief. If she still couldn't find it, she would have to consider going back first. 7th-rank sea beasts were quite common here, and maybe an 8th-rank sea beast would appear at any time. That would be dangerous. Master, it's there. Xiaofan's voice rang in her mind. Mo Tiange looked down and saw that the big island had a circumference of several hundred miles, more than 10 times larger than the small island where Mo Yaoqing lived. Moreover, the terrain was completely different. Most of the island was rocky, overgrown with ravines, and mixed with sand and stones. There was only a small amount of soil, so even plants were rare. The most important thing was that there was no spiritual aura on the island, so there weren't even demonic beasts nearby. This was good news for Mo Tiange. There were no spirit veins on the island, so it couldn't attract demonic beasts, so she didn't have to face any unknown demonic beasts. In the center of the island, there was a bulging volcano. There was no trace of an eruption, and it was cold without a trace of heat. Mo Tiange flew to the top of the volcano and looked down. It was dark inside, and she couldn't see anything clearly. She scanned it with her divine sense and didn't find any danger, so she slowly descended to the crater. As she descended lower and lower, Mo Tiange gradually saw what was inside the volcano. There was no lava, no heat, only cold volcanic walls. It was very dark inside, so she couldn't see anything clearly. Mo Tiange opened her palm and light gathered in it. The heaven and earth fan appeared in her hand, and the fan pendant emitted a faint white light. When she explored Mo Yaoqing's cave last time, she felt it was very inconvenient to take out the Mother Moonstone for illumination, so she simply polished the Mother Moonstone into a fan pendant and hung it on the heaven and earth fan, which was much more convenient to hold. Grandpa said there's water down there, so let me go down first, said Xiaofan, who landed behind her. Mo Tiange paused and nodded. Not long after Xiaofan landed, Mo Tiange heard the sound of water, and then Xiaofan's voice rang out. Master, come down. The water isn't very deep. Holding the heaven and earth fan, Mo Tiange carefully descended to the bottom of the volcano. She looked up and was a little stunned. Is there a road here? There was a shallow stream at the bottom of the volcano, but she didn't see any road around. In the water, Xiaofan said, Master, sit on my back. After thinking for a short while, Mo Tiange cast a water avoidance spell and sat on Xiaofan's back. Xiaofan flicked its tail and suddenly dived into the water. The Mother Moonstone emitted a faint light, but it only illuminated the narrow space around it. Mo Tiange released her divine sense and found that there was a passage in the water, but she didn't know where it led. As soon as Xiaofan entered the water, it was extremely vigorous. After swimming for a while, it sped up. Mo Tiange only felt that it dived deeper and deeper, and the pressure on the water avoidance spell's spiritual aura shield also increased. Of course, she was now a core formation cultivator, so the pressure at the bottom of the water was nothing to her, but she was confused. Water flowed downwards, and Xiaofan dived into the water. Was this a waterway? According to the fragmentary records on Mo Yaoqing's jade slip, it took her a lot of time to come to the celestial pole. Did she have to dive in the water for several months? Fortunately, she didn't doubt it for too long. After swimming for a long time, Xiaofan began to float up. The speed at which it floated up was getting faster and faster. Suddenly, with a splash, a person and a beast broke out of the water. Countless water droplets dripped from the spiritual aura shield. Mo Tiange waved her hand, removed the water avoidance spell, and released her divine sense. This was an underground river. It was winding and led to a very far place, and her divine sense couldn't feel the end. As for the surrounding rock walls, they were completely irregular in shape. Xiaofan carried her and swam forward slowly. The river was very cold. Even though it was a demonic beast, it still felt uncomfortable. Xiaofan, how about I take you flying? Xiaofan shook its head and refused. No, master, I like the feeling of swimming in the water. But this water, it's okay. Xiaofan patted its tail. In an instant, a layer of green aura emerged from its scales and wrapped its whole body. This way, I won't feel uncomfortable. Mo Tiange looked at it carefully and found that it was also a kind of protective spiritual aura, so she nodded. They didn't know how long they swam in the dark river. There was only the sound of water and Xiao Fan swimming around them. Emotienga held the heaven and earth fan and let her divine sense spread all the time. There were no spirit veins in this river, so even if there were fish in the water, they were just ordinary fish and didn't dare to approach her and Xiaofan. Several days later, Emotienga frowned and sensed spiritual aura. Then Xiaofan also stopped. Master, there are spirit veins ahead. Emotienga used her divine sense to observe for a while and said, there are no living things. Let's continue. Xiaofan responded and continued to swim forward. The spiritual aura was getting thicker and thicker. Emotienga looked at the surrounding rock walls and found that it was a spirit stone mine. However, the grade of the spirit stones was not very high. It seemed to be a small mine. One person and one beast passed through the middle of the spirit stone mine. With her sharp eyes, Emotienga found that something seemed to be growing on a spirit stone and said hurriedly, wait. Xiaofan stopped. What's wrong? From the rock wall, Emotienga carefully dug out a piece of jade that was shining with a sparkling white light and examined it carefully. Spirit gathering stone? Looking at the jade in her hand, she was surprised. It's actually a spirit gathering stone. Hearing the sound, Xiaofan asked curiously, Master, what's a spirit gathering stone? After confirming that the thing in her hand was indeed a spirit gathering stone, Emotienga put it into her Qianquan bag and said, a spirit gathering stone is a kind of jade that occasionally appears in spirit stone mines. It looks similar to spirit stones, but it has an effect of greatly condensing spiritual aura. In the process of concocting pills and refining tools, how to condense spiritual aura and seal it in medicinal pills and magic weapons is the most difficult process. With a spirit gathering stone, the success rate of concocting pills and refining tools can be improved. Oh, demonic beasts didn't understand concocting pills and refining tools, so Xiaofan only responded with a half understanding. Emotienga didn't expect that a spirit gathering stone would appear in this small mine, but she was pleasantly surprised. She told Xiaofan, swim around a few more times. We'll look for it. Chapter 343. Unfortunately, she didn't find any more spirit-gathering stones. Emotienga thought about it and shook her head with a smile. Although spirit-gathering stones weren't amazing treasures, they weren't something that could be found everywhere. It was already difficult to find one in such a small spirit stone vein. How many more did she want to find? She waved her hand to call Xiaofan back and said, let's keep going. Xiaofan responded and swam forward with her on its back. This spirit stone vein was really small. In just a moment, they swam out of its range and entered a dark underground river. Emotienga was used to this kind of darkness, so she simply calmed down and silently comprehended her state of mind. According to the celestial pole, the difference between Dao cultivators and demonic cultivators was that Dao cultivators had to pay attention to the cultivation of their state of mind while improving their strength. Otherwise, they would be stuck at the bottleneck of a breakthrough. Demonic cultivators, on the other hand, didn't care about this. They only needed to absorb spiritual aura and turn it into devil aura. Therefore, the cultivation method of the demonic path was condemned by the righteous path as unorthodox. This had nothing to do with right or wrong. In fact, the demonic path was indeed more likely to be possessed by the devil than the righteous path. Because the cultivation of one's state of mind had to keep up with one's realm, the higher a cultivator's cultivation level was, the more restrictions there would be. For example, aura refining cultivators often did evil things, but when they reached the foundation building realm, they often began to cultivate their mind and nature because they had to overcome their inner demons in order to form their gold core. Core formation and nascent soul cultivators were even more restrained. If they didn't have a grudge or great benefits, they generally wouldn't kill. Emotienga didn't think this was abnormal before, but after she formed her gold core, she thought this matter was a bit strange. The law of the jungle was the rule of the cultivation world. But why did there have to be an inner demon when it came to realm advancement? This made cultivators suppress their murderous nature. Of course, not all cultivators followed this rule. Master Song Feng was one of those high-level cultivators who killed indiscriminately. However, her master also told her that the old man Song Feng was a monster who was neither human nor ghost nor monster. He couldn't be regarded as a normal person at all. Thinking up to this point made Mo Tiange confused again. She felt she seemed to have overlooked something, but she also felt that she had grasped a key point. She closed her eyes and immersed herself in the darkness, slowly recalling. Every day was a boring journey. In the end, even Xiaofan became impatient. In order to appease it, Mo Tiange gave it a medicinal pill every day. Every time it ate a medicinal pill, it would obediently continue on their journey. When it got greedy, it would refuse to leave and insist on eating more. Mo Tiange was actually happy to see Xiaofan like this. No matter how well-behaved Xiaofan was, she was still a child to the sea dragon. It was too depressing if she didn't have the temper of a child. Now that it had returned to its original nature, it meant that it was closer to him. One person and one beast walked, sometimes stopping, sometimes walking. Because of the existence of the virtual sky world, they didn't find it very difficult to pass through this underground river. Gradually, time passed day by day. It seems to be getting hotter. Mo Tiange didn't use her water-repelling art. Instead, she stretched her hand into the river to explore it. Yifan still swam forward slowly and replied, "A little, but it doesn't matter, master. I'm not afraid of the heat." Although she said that, Mo Tiange didn't feel at ease. She didn't forget that this was a passage at the bottom of the volcano. Although the volcano had long stopped erupting, who knew if something would suddenly happen? After swimming forward for a while, she saw that the water was getting hotter and hotter. Mo Tiange reached in and found that it was much higher than her body temperature, which was really abnormal. They had been swimming in this underground river for a month, and the water had always been cold. Now that it suddenly became hot, there must be something strange. Xiaofan. Seeing that the water was steaming, Mo Tiange decisively shouted to stop it. "This water is unusual. Let's wait for a while." Yifan raised its head and said, "Master, do you think the water is too hot?" Mo Tiange frowned. "We're going through the passage at the bottom of the volcano. If there's lava in the depths, it'll be troublesome." Volcanic lava was a kind of earthly fire. If the grade of the lava was very high, it would be very troublesome to block the way. Although Mo Yaoqing had walked this path, it had been more than 5,000 years after all. She didn't know whether there would be any accidents. Yifan said, "Master, I'm not afraid of the heat. Let me explore the way." Mo Tiange hesitated. "What if there's danger?" "I'm already in the 5th rank, so I'm not afraid." Yifan said, "Master, don't treat me like a child who doesn't know anything. In the clan, I'm also an uncle." "Oh." Hearing its serious tone, Mo Tiange thought it was right, so she smiled and said, "All right, go and have a look. If there's anything wrong, come back immediately or call me." Yifan answered. When she floated in the air, it flicked its tail and went into the water. Mo Tiange looked at the place where it disappeared with a smile. Xiaohua and Feifei were very cute, but they couldn't talk. After having Yifan, she felt less lonely, as if she had someone to accompany her every day. She couldn't help but think of Qin Shi, who was already thousands of miles away. What was he doing? Was his cultivation going well? After a while, she heard the sound of water. Yifan finally came back. It came out of the water with a splash and said cheerfully, "Master, we're here." "What's going on?" Yifan said happily, "I swam for a long time and found there was no way to go. Then I dived and found another waterway leading to a hot spring." Hot spring. Mo Tiange was happy. This road led to a hot spring. Did that mean they'd reached their destination? "Master, come on, let's go out." Yifan was more eager than her. Mo Tiange didn't delay and sat on its back. "Then let's go." One person and one beast couldn't wait. Yifan waved its fins and rushed into the water like an arrow leaving the bow. Sure enough, they didn't swim far. They reached the end of the waterway after walking for a month. Yifan had already explored the way, so it just dived into the water. After swimming in the water for a long time and making many turns, Mo Tiange almost couldn't tell the route. It finally began to float. The water was getting hotter and hotter, and Mo Tiange guessed there must be a volcano here that hadn't erupted for a long time. But she didn't know if there were any houses near this hot spring. There was some spiritual aura here, so there should be a small spirit vein outside. Maybe there were individual cultivators living here. While thinking about it, Lil Fan swam faster and faster and began to float up. Suddenly, a faint light appeared on top of its head, and then the light became brighter and brighter. A man and a beast emerged from the water with a splash. After walking in the underground waterway for a month, Mo Tiange hadn't seen the sun for a long time, so she couldn't help but narrow her eyes to block the light. Monster. At this time, she suddenly heard human voices, followed by chaotic footsteps and panicked screams. Mo Tiange's divine sense had long sensed the existence of these people, but they were all mortals, so she didn't care. Presumably, they were frightened by Yifun's appearance. After adapting to the light, she put down her arms and quickly glanced around. This hot spring wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. It covered an area of several acres. Steam was rising from the water, and the surrounding was shaded by greenery. At first glance, she felt the scenery was excellent, as beautiful as a fairyland. Yifun, let's go up. She patted Yifun's head, brushed her sleeves, and gently floated ashore without getting wet. Although Yifun didn't want to leave the water, she obediently followed her. The noises on the shore became even more chaotic. Mo Tiange looked up and saw some married women wearing coarse clothes hurriedly running away, leaving behind clothes and clothes pestles all over the ground. She shook her head and ignored them. She thought the women here weren't any different from those in the celestial pole. Their clothes were also similar, but their accents were a bit different. With this thought in mind, she slowly walked out of the hot spring with Yifun. Some courtyard walls were exposed in a place a little further away from the hot spring, which seemed to belong to a big family in the secular world. Mo Tiange sensed that the place where the courtyard was located was the place with the densest spiritual aura in this spirit vein. She also sensed the breath of low-level cultivators inside. Could it be that this was a cultivation family in the secular world? She smiled and thought of an idea. She said to Yifun, "Yifun, there are a lot of people here. Why don't you go into the spiritual beast bag first?" Yifun had always been very obedient. Hearing her words, it obediently agreed and went back into the spiritual beast bag. After settling Yifun down, Mo Tiange restrained her spiritual aura pressure and walked a short distance away. Then she saw several well-dressed men walking towards her. They walked hurriedly as if they had something urgent to do. Judging from their clothes, they seemed to be the guards of a big family. When they came closer and saw her standing not far from the lake, they were surprised. Then the leader, who looked like a housekeeper, walked towards her with the group of men, stopped in front of her, and respectfully said, "Greetings, fairy." She had restrained her spiritual aura, so these people were mortals with a little spiritual aura. They could only feel the rich spiritual aura on her body, but they couldn't distinguish her cultivation level. Mo Tiange nodded lightly. Seeing her graceful bearing and amiable attitude, the housekeeper didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly asked, "We're from the Lu family. May I ask, fairy, are you passing by here?" Mo Tiange saw the man was very respectful, so she also answered politely, "I'm an individual cultivator from another place. I came here by chance and accidentally startled mortals." "What Lu family are you talking about? Is it a cultivation family here?" "Fairy, it turns out you're an individual cultivator from another place." The man said happily after getting the answer, "Our LV family is the largest cultivation family on South Pole Island. It's rare for a fellow cultivator to come here. My family's old master will be very happy if he knows. Fairy, would you like to be a guest of our LV family?" Hearing that this place was indeed called South Pole Island, Mo Tiange felt a little relieved. According to Yifun, South Pole Island was already within the scope of Yunzhong. So, she finally arrived in Yunzhong smoothly. Her gaze fell on the LV family's housekeeper. This person was obviously immortal, but he had spiritual aura. Although he hadn't reached the level of refining qi into spirit, he had already tempered his body with spiritual aura. Mo Tiange thought that Yunzhong was indeed a holy land for cultivators. Even these mortals in front of her were obviously cultivators. This was her first time in Yunzhong, so she needed to inquire about some information first. It would be good to go to this LV family to have a look. With this thought in mind, Tiange said with a smile, "It's naturally good to have a fellow cultivator invite me. I'll accept your invitation then." Chapter 344. The Lu family's housekeeper called himself Luan. He carefully talked to Tiange along the way and introduced the situation of the Lu family on South Pole Island to her. It turned out that there was a large island in the northeast of Yunzhong, separated by a shallow strait, which divided the island into two parts, the north and the south. The North Island was huge and there were several good spirit veins on it, so several small and medium-sized cultivation groups settled there. Moreover, Yunzhong was different from the celestial pole. There was no place they couldn't go. There were many people hunting sea beasts on the coast. Because there were spirit veins on the North Island, many sea beasts gathered nearby, so it was very lively. However, the South Island was only 1/10 the size of the North Island, and it only had a weak spirit vein. Small and medium-sized cultivation groups and large cultivation clans didn't care about it, so no one usually came here. The Lu family was neither strong nor weak, so they settled here. This island was said to be the northernmost place in Yunzhong, so it was called North Pole Island. Since it was divided into South and North Islands, the people of the South Island called their place South Pole Island. After listening to his explanation, Tiange finally understood that South Pole didn't mean this island was the extreme south of Yunzhong. The name South Pole Island was only known by the Lu family and the residents here. Foreign cultivators generally went to the North Island and didn't know there was a South Island here. After Luan finished talking about the South Pole Island, he asked about Tiange's origin. Tiange said she was just an individual cultivator who traveled around because she didn't have the chance to advance. Because Yunzhong was huge and she knew some things about Yunzhong, Luan was just a housekeeper of a small cultivation clan, so she didn't think there was anything wrong with him. From Luan, Tiange learned that the old master of the Lu family was an early-stage foundation-building cultivator who was more than 200 years old. In addition, there were several talented juniors in the family. All members of the Lu family practiced immortal spells, and there were quite a few aura-refining cultivators among them. However, they, the housekeepers and guards, were only nobodies in the Lu family. They were all mortals, and up until now, they were only able to temper their bodies with spiritual aura. Tiange also knew that mortals couldn't cultivate to become immortals. They didn't have spiritual roots and couldn't retain spiritual aura. With hard work and medicinal pills, they could reach the first layer of the aura-refining realm at most and could only use some simple immortal spells without disasters or diseases. However, those who could cultivate to the first layer of qi training were few and far between. Most people couldn't even reach this realm and were unable to cast off their mortal bodies. Through Lu An's words, Tiange could see that cultivation was indeed very popular in Yunzhong. As long as a family had some money, there wasn't a single person who didn't cultivate. Because they couldn't see through her cultivation level, they cautiously asked her whether she was a foundation-building cultivator or not. She didn't want to make it public, so she acquiesced. These people were very happy to see this and asked many questions about cultivation along the way. Since these mortals were so fanatical about cultivation, Tiange gave them a few pointers. Her explanation was simple and easy to understand, but it also hit the nail on the head. These people were suddenly enlightened and were extremely grateful to her. Not long after, they arrived at the Lu family's mansion. Luan personally led her into the courtyard and reported to the chief steward. The chief steward was a low-level cultivator with spiritual roots. At first, he was indifferent to Luan, but once he saw Tiange, his attitude immediately changed. He respectfully invited her into the reception hall and gave her a grand reception. He then ordered someone to quickly report to the old master. At that moment, Tiange restrained her spiritual breath and pretended to be in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. She learned from Luan that although the cultivation level of Yunzhong was higher than that of the celestial pole, there weren't many high-level cultivators. There were very few core formation and nascent soul cultivators in the outside world, so the late stage of the foundation building realm wouldn't attract too much attention. Moreover, their cultivation levels could be considered high, so she could avoid some unnecessary trouble. The old master of Lu family's divine sense had long sensed the arrival of a foundation-building cultivator. Just as the chief steward was about to send someone to invite her, the old master of Lu family came out of the backyard. Although this person was called the old master, he looked to be about 40 years old. He was well-dressed and had a radiant complexion. Obviously, he was good at taking care of himself. As soon as he saw Xianxia, he was startled. When he regained his composure, his attitude became even more polite. He came forward to greet Xianxia. "Fellow Daoist, I'm Lu Qingdong. Fellow Daoist, you've come to visit my Lu family. I'm sorry I didn't go out to greet you." Xianxia returned his greeting, neither too enthusiastic nor too cold. She smiled and said, "So your fellow Daoist Lu. My surname is Mo, and my given name is Qingwei. I'm an individual cultivator. I accidentally came here to travel and happened to run into your family, so I came to your mansion to disturb you. Please forgive me." "You're too kind." Seeing that Xianxia was polite and wasn't the kind of cultivator who looked down on low-level cultivators just because her cultivation level was high, the old master of Lu family, Lu Qingdong, was delighted and even more enthusiastic. "We're both cultivators of the righteous path. Meeting each other is fate. Fellow Daoist Mo, you're too polite. Please take a seat." The two of them greeted each other and sat down as host and guest. Lu Qingdong ordered them to serve good tea and treated them very enthusiastically. After drinking the tea, Lu Qingdong carefully sized up Xianxia. He was quite surprised at her young age. It wasn't easy for individual cultivators to cultivate. Those who could build their foundation were rare, and those who could cultivate to the late stage of the foundation building realm were even rarer. Xianxia, who looked to be in her 20s, had an extraordinary bearing and had such a high cultivation level, so she looked like a disciple of a big cultivation group. With that thought in mind, Lu Qingdong put on a smile and said politely, "Fellow Daoist Mo, you're so graceful and your cultivation level is so high, but you're actually just an individual cultivator. I really admire you." How could Xianxia not understand his probing intention? She just smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist Lu, you're too polite. I'm only able to cultivate to this realm thanks to my elder. When I first entered the path of immortality, I had an elder by my side to look after me. If it weren't for that elder, I'm afraid I'd still be lingering in the aura-refining realm." Upon hearing what she said, a hint of understanding flashed in Lu Qingdong's eyes. He then smiled and said, "I see. However, since fellow Daoist Mo can cultivate to the late stage of the foundation-building realm, your talent is obviously extraordinary. It really makes a mediocre person like me envious." "Not at all. I was just lucky." Xianxia still smiled without the slightest trace of pride on her face. Seeing this, Lu Qingdong thought even more highly of her. He asked again, "May I know where fellow Daoist Mo cultivated before? Did you come to South Pole Island for something important? Although my Lu clan isn't a big cultivation clan, we've been here for hundreds of years. Maybe we can help you." "Fellow Daoist Lu, you're too polite." Xianxia smiled and said, "To be honest, ever since I set foot on the path of immortality, I've been wandering around with that elder. Later, that elder passed away, and I traveled around by myself without a fixed residence. This time, I came to South Pole Island because I accidentally intruded and startled your clan. I'm really sorry." "Fellow Daoist Mo, you're too polite. What's so important about this?" Lu Qingdong paused and said with a smile, "In that case, fellow Daoist and our Lu clan are fated. Although our South Pole Island and North Pole Island are connected, few cultivators come and go. It's rare for a fellow Daoist to come, so as the host, I must entertain you well." Then, Lu Qingdong started chatting with her with great enthusiasm. Xianxia knew why LV Qingdong was so enthusiastic towards her. The difference between the early stage and the late stage of the foundation-building realm wasn't small. Since this Lu clan was only a small cultivation clan, Lu Qingdong probably didn't meet many late-stage foundation-building cultivators, so he naturally had to make friends with her and take the opportunity to talk about cultivation. Mo Tiange thought that although her cultivation technique was different from ordinary people's, they were all cultivators, so there must be similarities. Giving pointers to an early-stage foundation-building cultivator wouldn't be a problem for her, so she calmly accepted Lu Qingdong's hospitality. The two of them talked for a long time and discussed the path of cultivation. Soon after, Lu Qingdong ordered the Lu clan's children to come and greet her. Mo Tiange met them one by one and found several of them had good spiritual roots, so she praised them, making Lu Qingdong feel very proud. Among the Lu clan's children, there was a little girl who was said to be just 18 years old and already in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. She was Lu Qingdong's most beautiful granddaughter. When Mo Tiange heard Lu Qingdong's complacent tone when he introduced this granddaughter, she knew this little girl was very favored, so she praised her. "Your granddaughter has such a high cultivation level at such a young age. Her future will definitely be bright." Although her words were polite, they weren't nonsense. Back then, she was already in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm at the age of 17, which was given to her by second uncle using Yi clan's savings. The highest cultivation level in the Lu clan was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm, so they couldn't compare to the Yi clan at all. However, this little girl's cultivation level wasn't worse than hers back then, so her aptitude was quite good. Hearing her praise, Lu Qingdong smiled crookedly and said, "You flatter me, fellow Daoist Mo, you're too polite." Lu Qionying, the little girl from the Lu clan, wasn't afraid at all. She stared at Mo Tiange for a long time and said with a smile, "Senior is so young. You look like an elder sister." Lu Qingdong hastily scolded her. "Don't talk nonsense. Senior's cultivation level is profound, but she looks young. How can you be so rude?" Mo Tiange understood what Lu Qingdong was implying. Although she looked young, her real age was hard to tell. She wasn't the kind of woman who cared about age and appearance, so she just smiled and didn't feel unhappy. Lu Qionying pouted and said, "Grandpa, you don't understand. I said Senior looks like an elder sister because Senior is young and beautiful. Calling you Senior sounds like you're old. Calling you elder sister is better." "This child," Mo Tiange smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist Lu, you don't have to blame your granddaughter. She praised me for being young and beautiful, so how could I not be happy?" Lu Qingdong glared at Lu Qionying, expressed his apology, and said, "This child has been spoiled since she was a child. Although her words aren't very respectful, her heart is good." Mo Tiange saw the faint complacency on his face and felt it was funny in her heart. Although Lu family's patriarch apologized on behalf of his granddaughter, in his heart he thought his granddaughter was very good. Soon after, the Lu family held a banquet. After eating and drinking, they talked about a lot of cultivation matters. In the end, they invited Mo Tiange to stay in the Lu family for a few days. Mo Tiange wanted to inquire about Yunzhong from the Lu family, so she agreed. Lu Qionying, the little girl from the Lu family, was instructed by Lu Qingdong to stay with Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange was clear about Lu Qingdong's plan. In the cultivation world, although the gender of cultivators wasn't very important, there were still differences. It was easier for female cultivators to communicate with each other than male cultivators. He asked his granddaughter to stay with Mo Tiange because he hoped the two of them could get closer so he could give his granddaughter some pointers. Giving pointers to a little girl in the aura refining realm was a piece of cake for her. Moreover, Lu Qionying was smart, but she was just a little girl, so it would be easier to get some information from her, so she was very happy. After the banquet, both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves, so Mo Tiange went to the guest house accompanied by Lu Qionying. Chapter 345. Senior Mo, how old are you in the end? Lu Qionying, the little girl from the Lu family, suddenly asked. Mo Tiange sat cross-legged to adjust her breath. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "Why do you ask?" Lu Qionying tilted her head and looked confused. I think Senior looks young and doesn't look like it's because of look-preserving pills, but Grandpa said you're already in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. Maybe you're even older than him. This little girl? How could she say something like that? Was she naive? Tiange glanced at her and said, "You have good eyesight. You can tell whether people have taken look-preserving pills or not." Lu Qiangying touched her head embarrassedly. "Senior, please don't be offended. When I see my grandants, I always feel that although they look young, their actions are unnatural. But Senior can't see it at all. Of course, although Tiange also took look-preserving pills, she was only 100 years old, which was considered young according to the lifespan of core formation cultivators. But she just smiled and said, "I've also taken look-preserving pills. I'm over 100 years old now, but my lifespan is less than half, so you can't see it." "Oh, I see." Lu Qiangying lost interest, but she turned her gaze and asked excitedly, "Senior, have you been to a lot of places? Have you seen anything interesting?" This question made Tiange pause. She thought for a moment then said, "When I was young, I wandered around with my uncle. Although I've been to a lot of places, my cultivation level was still low at that time. Every day, I just wanted to earn enough spirit stones to cultivate. How could there be anything interesting? If I could cultivate in peace and have enough spirit stones to buy medicinal pills to eat, I'd be satisfied." Lu Qiangying blinked. "So Senior used to have such a hard life." "It's not hard at all. My uncle is a foundation-building cultivator, so it's already good that we have a place to live. It's also not easy for many young cultivators to rent an immortal's cave with spiritual aura." At this point, she recalled the many injustices she saw with second uncle in those years and couldn't help but sigh. It's not easy to be an individual cultivator. It had been a long time since she thought about these past events. Now that her cultivation level was high and her identity was extraordinary, she was no longer the little cultivator who struggled at the bottom of the cultivation world. Now that she thought about it, she missed second uncle even more. How good would it be if second uncle could see this day? She pulled herself back from her memories and glanced at the little girl. She suddenly smiled and slowly said, "I know why your grandfather sent you here. You're just a little girl who hasn't experienced the ways of the world. It's too difficult for you to do such a thing. Forget it, I'll tell you the truth. If I wanted to harm your Lu family, I wouldn't need to feign civility with my cultivation. Of course, I do have my own motives for befriending you. Since I've made things clear, I might as well be frank with you." Although her eyes were calm, there was a hidden sharpness in them. LV Qiangying was shocked. The reason her grandfather called her here was indeed because he wanted to test whether this senior MO had other motives. If she didn't, he wanted to take this opportunity to get her to give him a few pointers. If she was suspicious, the Lu family could make preparations early. Ever since she was a child, she had always been smart and quick-witted. She had always been pampered at home, so she thought she could easily deceive this senior if she pretended to be innocent. However, she didn't expect that she was only 18 years old. How could she compare to this senior who had lived for more than 100 years? At this moment, she was faintly regretting her decision. If this senior really had bad intentions, how could she keep her life when she was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm? Senior, Tiange showed a faint smile. She was still as amiable as before. "You don't need to be afraid. I don't want anything from your Lu family. I just want to ask some questions. If you answer them well, I'll leave." Senior, LV Qiangying was a bit anxious. Grandfather told her that as long as this senior didn't have bad intentions, she must win her over. After all, it was rare for them to meet a late-stage foundation-building cultivator. Tiange remained unmoved. She raised her hand to stop LV Qiangying from speaking and said, "Answer me well. If you're satisfied, I'll give you some benefits." LV Qiangying hastily swallowed the rest of her words. Although she was anxious, she knew she couldn't afford to offend this senior. Moreover, she also promised to give her some benefits. What does senior want to ask? Junior will definitely tell you everything I know. At this time, LV Qiangying's attitude was very respectful. She no longer talked like a naive little girl and now behaved like a cultivator. Mo Tiange thought her current appearance was more pleasing to the eye, so she smiled and said gently, "First, tell me about the general situation in Yunzhong." A strange expression flashed across LV Qiangying's eyes. She obviously didn't understand what was going on, but she still said honestly, "May I know what Senior Mo wants to know?" "Cultivation group, spirit veins, country." "I've already told you everything," Mo Tiange said faintly. "Tell me everything you know. The more you tell me, the more I'll reward you." As she spoke, she put her hand into her Qianquan bag, took out a jade bottle, and threw it to LV Qiangying. LV Qiangying caught it and opened it. It was a whole bottle of aura-converging pills, about 30 to 50 of them. She was overjoyed. Even though she was a very favored junior of the LV family, she usually ate aura-converging pills and only got a small bottle of aura-converging pills every year, about 5 or 6 of them. This Senior Mo is actually so generous. Thinking up to this point, she became even more respectful. Yes. LV Qiangying was also a smart girl. After hearing Mo Tiange's words, she guessed this senior probably wasn't from Yunzhong, so she carefully began to talk about Yunzhong's territory and then slowly talked about cultivation groups and so on. Mo Tiange just listened quietly. Yunzhong was vast and had many countries. However, there were only 3 big countries, Eastern Tang, Southern Zhou, and Northern Lin. These 3 countries occupied most of Yunzhong's land. Different from the Celestial Pole, these 3 countries were supported by cultivation groups. Eastern Tang and Southern Zhou were the territories of the Righteous Path, while Northern Lin was the territory of the Devil Path. Usually, these 3 countries lived in harmony. After all, Yunzhong didn't have the concept that the Righteous Path and the Devil Path couldn't coexist. Whether it was the Righteous Path or the Devil Path, they all lived by the principle of self-preservation. They wouldn't fight unless there was a conflict of interest. Eastern Tang was mainly populated by cultivators and was also the largest country among the 3 countries. There were countless small and medium-sized cultivation groups, and there were 5 that could be considered big cultivation groups: Jiuyan Sect, Danxia Sect, Jingshu Sect, Common Law School, and 5 Elements Valley. Among these 5 big cultivation groups, Jiuyan Sect was the most powerful. It was said that under the sect's founder, there were 9 disciples. These 9 disciples were very outstanding, so they established the sect together and honored their master as the founder of the sect, hence the name Jiuyan Sect. Danxia Sect was originally second only to Jiuyan Sect and was also a big cultivation group. However, in recent years, it had declined. Among the 5 cultivation groups, it was only slightly stronger than 5 Elements Valley. Jingshu Sect and Common Law School were equal in power. Among them, because the founder of Jingshu Sect was a woman, most of its disciples were female. As for 5 Elements Valley, it was a cultivation group that specialized in formations. It was said that all of its disciples had extraordinary attainments in formations. However, this kind of cultivation group that focused on unorthodox methods was never prosperous, so 5 Elements Valley was the weakest among the 5 big cultivation groups. However, even so, the other cultivation groups didn't dare to bully them at all. After all, the biggest barrier of each cultivation group was the Great Mountain Protecting Formation. If they offended 5 Elements Valley, it would be troublesome when they fought. In southern Zhou, Confucian cultivators controlled the government and Buddhist cultivators controlled the state religion. Most of the common people in southern Zhou believed in Buddhism, so there were Buddhist temples everywhere and incense was flourishing. Confucian cultivators, on the other hand, controlled the power of the country and used academies to educate the subjects and people. Because Confucian cultivators and Buddhist cultivators sought different things, their doctrines were similar, so the two were very harmonious. Although she knew there were Buddhist cultivators in other places, she had never seen them in the Celestial Pole, so she couldn't help but ask a few more questions. Unfortunately, Lu Qiangying had never traveled outside, and South Pole Island was far away from the mainland, so she didn't know much about Buddhist cultivation groups. However, no matter how much Lu Qiangying didn't know, Buddhist cultivators were common in Yunzhong, so she had a general idea. The so-called Buddha was said to be a sect that had been passed down from ancient times. They paid attention to cause and effect, strictly disciplined themselves, and believed that all evil thoughts were born from the heart. They cut off human desires and cultivated hard to become Buddhists. This made Mo Tiange feel a little strange. She naturally understood the so-called cause and effect. There was also such content in the Tao scriptures of cultivators, but they weren't as cautious as Buddhist cultivators. The cultivation path of Buddhist cultivators was nothing more than 3 sentences. All actions are impermanent, all laws are non-self, and nirvana is silent. The so-called impermanence of all actions meant that everything in the world was impermanent, all laws are non-self, which required Buddhist cultivators to let go of their obsessions and find their true self. Nirvana is the final destination pursued by Buddhist cultivators, which was neither born nor destroyed to prove eternal life. Mo Tiange slowly comprehended in her heart. She deeply felt that the so-called Buddhist cultivators were actually similar to Tao cultivators. For example, cause and effect, the impermanence of the world, and abandoning obsessions. But on the other hand, the doctrines of Buddhist cultivators were very different from those of Tao cultivators. The Tao scriptures said that heaven and earth were heartless and treated all living things as straw dogs. In other words, heaven and earth didn't care about benevolence or inhumanity. All living things lived and died on their own, and they had their own laws. Therefore, cultivators in the celestial pole never had the concept of benevolence. Cultivation was a road full of thorns. If they wanted to become true immortals, they had to kill their way out. They had to kill devil cultivators, demonic beasts, and even their own kind. According to Lu Qiongyin, cultivators in Yunzhong weren't different from cultivators in the celestial pole. But Buddhist cultivators weren't like that. They cultivated their minds and themselves and rarely had killing intent. They would only stop killing with killing if they had no other choice. Therefore, in Yunzhong, Buddhist cultivators were rarely trapped in their state of mind. It had always been easier for them to advance to the core formation and nascent soul realms than Tao cultivators. But their shortcoming was that their cultivation speed was too slow. If one could become a foundation-building cultivator out of 100 aura-refining cultivators, one could only become a foundation-building cultivator out of 100 aura-refining cultivators. After listening to this, Mo Tiange sank into contemplation. She felt she seemed to have grasped a key point. Whether it was Tao cultivators or Buddhist cultivators, there were contradictions in their doctrines. However, Buddhist cultivators had fewer doctrines because they could at least justify themselves. Tao cultivators, on the other hand, simply didn't make sense in some aspects. Cultivation was to cultivate the mind. This was something cultivators knew from the moment they set foot on the path to immortality, but why were they like demonic beasts, full of bloody killing intent? Chapter 346. After asking about everything she was interested in, Mo Tiange smiled and said, "This bottle of medicinal pills is my reward for you. Tell your grandfather that I'll take my leave now." Then she stood up, pushed the door open and left. "Senior." Lu Qiongyin chased after her, but when she stepped out of the door, she couldn't see Mo Tiange anymore. She was stunned for a while and sighed in distress. She messed up what her grandfather told her to do. However, when she thought of that bottle of medicinal pills, she became happy again. In any case, she made a lot of money. Mo Tiange restrained her breath and flew to North Pole Island according to Lu Qionying's instructions. She originally planned to stay in the Lu family for a while and learn more about the cultivation world in Yunzhong from Lu Qingdong, but she didn't expect them to be so cautious and suspicious, which made her feel very troublesome. But it didn't matter. When she went to North Pole Island, she could naturally inquire about it slowly. South Pole Island was really small. After flying for a while, Mo Tiange saw the strait the Lu family mentioned. Although it was called a strait, it was actually only 1 kilometer away. Even an aura-refining cultivator could easily cross it with talismans. However, the spirit veins on this 2 kilometer away were like heaven and earth. Before she even arrived at North Pole Island, Mo Tiange already sensed that there were at least 3 to 5 fairly good spirit veins on this big island. They were even better than the ones on Mount Yunwu back then. In comparison, South Pole Island was nothing more than a small hill with some spiritual aura. No wonder the Liu family could monopolize South Pole Island even though the highest cultivation level was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm. In fact, the spirit veins on North Pole Island weren't worth mentioning at all. After flying over the strait, she saw a bustling town on North Pole Island. Cultivators were everywhere, and foundation building cultivators weren't rare either. She landed at the town gate and was looking around when she suddenly heard an enthusiastic voice. Senior, are you here for the first time on North Pole Island? Tienga didn't pay attention to it, but when the person turned around and repeated himself, she realized he was talking to her. The person talking to her was a teenager who seemed to be only 16 or 17 years old. Although he had a little spiritual aura, he hadn't reached the first layer of the aura refining realm. At first glance, she could tell he was a mortal who mingled in the streets. She glanced at the young man and asked faintly, "What's the matter?" The teenager immediately revealed a smile and said respectfully, "Senior, you look like a foundation building expert at first glance. May I ask if this is your first time coming to North Pole Island?" Not bad. Tienga cast a sidelong glance at the youngster. She saw that he was dressed in short clothes and was bare-chested. He didn't look like he wanted to sell her things, but he had an attentive smile on his face. No matter how she looked at it, he looked like he was trying to solicit business. In that case, Senior, did you come to North Pole Island to visit friends or to hunt beasts? Upon hearing what he said, Tienga narrowed her eyes and stared at him. Upon seeing Tienga's meaningful glance, the youngster hastily explained, "Senior, please don't misunderstand. I'm a broker. I'm in this bazaar all year round. When I come across cultivators who come to our North Pole Island for the first time, I'll solicit some business to make a living." "Oh, I see." Tienga withdrew her hostile gaze and asked, "Then what kind of business do you want to solicit?" Seeing that she was interested, the young man's face lit up and he explained enthusiastically, "That depends on what Senior is here for. I'm not boasting, but I grew up on North Pole Island, so there's nothing I don't know about the island." This youngster was indeed confident. Tienga smiled and asked, "If I came to visit a friend, what would you do? If I came to hunt beasts, what would you do?" The youngster answered with a smile, "If Senior came to visit a friend, then as long as Senior can tell me your friend's name and cultivation level, I'll have a way to ask someone to look for them. If Senior came to hunt beasts, then I can find a suitable place for Senior to stay and introduce you to other cultivators who come to hunt beasts with you. In addition, I also have a map of North Pole Island, which clearly shows which demonic beasts can be found. I can also introduce Senior to merchants who accept beast cores. I guarantee they're big merchants who offer fair prices." Tienga was slightly surprised. "You're not a cultivator. How could you know big merchants who accept beast cores?" The youngster scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "To be honest, I don't have any other skills, but I'm very slippery. If I can make those shopkeepers happy, they'll be willing to give me a small profit. Besides, I often introduce some business to them. Although I don't earn much, it's still a source of income." After listening to what he said, Tienga thought for a moment then said, "It's my first time here, so I need a place to stay. Can you introduce it to me?" The youngster was overjoyed and said enthusiastically, "I wonder what Senior wants? Do you want a place with rich spiritual aura or an ordinary one? How big is the place? Do you want an immortal's cave or a residence? How long do you want to stay?" Tienga said, "It's fine as long as the spiritual aura is enough. It doesn't matter if it's an immortal's cave or a residence. There's also no requirement for the size of the place, I just want it to be a bit quiet. As for how long, I can't say for sure. Maybe a few days, maybe a month." "I see." The youngster lowered his head and thought for a while then said, "Senior, the length of your stay is uncertain, so it's not suitable for you to rent an immortal's cave. There's no requirement for the spiritual aura or the size of the place, so an inn sounds more suitable. I know several inns with independent courtyards, which are specially provided for senior experts like you to stay in. The spiritual aura is good, and there'll be people to serve you at all times, so it'll be absolutely quiet." At this point, the youngster smiled apologetically. But the price might be a bit expensive. What price? 1 spirit stone a day is about right. The youngster emphasized, this price is still a bit cheaper than renting a good immortal's cave. Xianxia smiled then asked, then what about your commission? Upon hearing this question, the youngster rubbed his hands embarrassedly and said, Senior, just give me some running expenses. Xianxia smiled. She knew these brokers could get hard-earned money from merchants if they made a deal, so she didn't ask much about running expenses. She also didn't want to attract attention, so she said, 1 spirit stone a day is passable. You just need to find an ordinary one. The youngster looked at her and asked, Senior, will you follow me to take a look? After discussing with the youngster, Xianxia followed him through the streets and alleys. Before long, they arrived at the entrance of an inn. This inn was located on a street that wasn't very lively. It was neither new nor old, and there weren't too many people or too few people, which just happened to meet her ordinary requirements. Senior, please come in. The youngster took the lead. As soon as he entered the inn, he shouted, Shopkeeper Dong, Shopkeeper Dong. Upon hearing his voice, a stout middle-aged man came out from behind the counter. He didn't have any spiritual aura on his body. He was a complete mortal. He patted the dust on his hands and glanced at the youngster. Oh, isn't this a small table? What's wrong? Are you here to get your commission from last time? I'm telling you, that customer is too hard to serve. She didn't pay me much, and she even made my staff run around everywhere. Here, this is all I have. Don't think it's too little. If it weren't for our old friendship, I wouldn't have given you any. The shopkeeper took out a small piece of silver from the drawer and handed it to the youngster. The youngster, who was called a small table, took it and said with a smile, How could I think it's too little? What kind of friendship do we have? Do you think I, a small table, am a mercenary who can't distinguish right from wrong? But this time, it's different. This time, I brought a distinguished guest with me. Shopkeeper Dong absent-mindedly raised his head and cast a glance at Xianxia standing behind him. He was startled and hastily walked out from behind the counter. He said respectfully, Fairy, are you here to stay? Xianxia didn't answer and just stared at the small table. The small table said, This senior is an expert in the foundation building realm. She wants to find a quiet place to stay temporarily. Don't you have several small courtyards? Do you still have them? Yes. Shopkeeper Dong said with a smile. Fairy, how many days do you want to stay? We still have 3 small courtyards left. One is full of spiritual aura, while the other 2 are ordinary. Apart from other things, there's no need to talk about how quiet they are. Facing their eager gazes, Xianxia smiled and said, Then let's go take a look. Yes. The shopkeeper said to the waiter and personally led the 2 of them to look at the courtyards. Outside the inn's back door was actually a small hill. As the shopkeeper led the way, he rambled on and on. Fairy, of the 3 small courtyards we have left, the ones with abundant spiritual aura are a bit further away, and the ones with ordinary spiritual aura are not far behind us. The best one is naturally the one with abundant spiritual aura. It's far away, there are people to serve you, and the layout is also elegant. The other 2 aren't bad, but the spiritual aura is a bit lacking. As he spoke, Xianxia saw the 2 courtyards with ordinary spiritual aura he mentioned. They were built in 2 rows in the valley. Each courtyard was about 300 meters apart, and many trees were planted in the middle. She used her divine sense to examine the 2 rows of courtyards. There were 5 or 6 cultivators' breaths in them. After thinking for a while, she said, What else? Seeing that she wasn't satisfied with the courtyards in front of her, Shopkeeper Dong became more attentive. He made an inviting gesture and said, There's another one in the depths. Fairy, please. Although this valley was small, the spirit vein was pretty good. It wasn't inferior to the one in the South Pole Islands Lu clan. Apparently, behind this inn was a cultivation clan or something similar. The deeper they went, the denser the spiritual aura became. After walking for about half a mile, they saw 2 more courtyards where the spiritual aura was the densest. Fairy, please take a look. Shopkeeper Dong pointed at the 2 courtyards hidden in the forest. This is the place with the densest spiritual aura in this small spirit vein. We only built 2 courtyards far away from each other, so we won't be disturbed. Mo Tiange looked around. There was a small forest between the 2 courtyards. If they didn't intentionally offend them, there shouldn't be any problems. She pondered for a while and made up her mind. She asked, "Which courtyard is empty?" Shopkeeper Dong pointed at the one slightly outside and said, "It's that one. The one inside is also occupied by a fairy, but most of the time, she's not there." Mo Tiange nodded. That was the best way. She wouldn't be disturbed. After walking in the sewer for a month, she now wanted to find a place to rest. Shopkeeper Dong led her into the small courtyard in the forest. There was a mortal woman cleaning the courtyard. He called out loudly, "Ian." The woman turned around. When she saw the shopkeeper coming in with a guest, she hastily bowed to greet him. Shopkeeper Dong said, "Fairy, please take a look. There are 3 rooms here. This room can be used for concocting medicinal pills, this room can be used for cultivating, and the small hall in the middle can be used for receiving guests. In addition, if you have any spiritual beasts, you can raise them here. If there's anything you need, you can just tell Ian to do it. If there's nothing, she'll stay in the small side room and absolutely won't disturb you." Mo Tiange looked around and was very satisfied. Although this courtyard was small, it was elegantly decorated. Everything needed was here. It wouldn't matter even if she lived here for a year or a half. "Fairy, are you satisfied? It's settled?" Mo Tiange asked, "What's the price?" "1 spirit stone a day," Shopkeeper Dong said with a smile. "Rest assured, this price is absolutely fair." Mo Tiange nodded. She took out a handful of spirit stones from her Qiankuan bag and handed them to the shopkeeper. "I'll stay here for about 10 days. If I'm still here, I'll come back to collect the money." Shopkeeper Dong nodded and bowed. "Then I won't disturb you anymore." Little Desk, who had been following behind them, looked at the dozen or so spirit stones and smiled. There were so many spirit stones, so at least one of them was his commission. He stepped forward and said, "Senior, I'll also take my leave first." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. She then touched her Qiankuan bag and gave him a spirit stone. "Consider this money for your hard work." Little Desk's eyes brightened and he repeatedly expressed his gratitude. "Thank you for your reward, Senior." Chapter 347. After Shopkeeper Dong and the small table left, Mo Tiange dismissed the maid, arranged her own formation in the cultivation room, and entered the virtual sky world to rest. She told the maid Ian that she wanted to rest for 3 to 5 days and not to disturb her if there was nothing important. The maid was used to serving cultivators and knew the rules very well. Needless to say, she said she would only clean the courtyard and would never enter the house. Mo Tiange was very satisfied. The mortals on North Pole Island were very sensible. Perhaps it was because the people in Yunzhong had long been used to living with cultivators, so they had a good understanding of their habits. In the next few days, Mo Tiange didn't do anything important. She just adjusted her breath, played with the spiritual beasts, and read Mo Yaoqing's cultivation notes. Half a month passed. Shopkeeper Dong came once, and she paid him dozens of spirit stones, saying she wanted to stay for a while. Shopkeeper Dong was very happy to see her paying so readily. He told her a lot about North Pole Island and told her that if she needed anything, she could directly tell Ian to call him. All the guests living here didn't need to pay extra for inquiring about information or buying things for her. Mo Tiange thanked him and asked him for a map without any politeness. On the map, North Pole Island was carefully marked with various spirit veins and the distribution of demonic beasts. Unfortunately, other places only had a rough outline. Yunzhong continent only had the distribution of the 3 big countries, and the locations of some cultivation groups weren't marked at all. In addition, Mo Tiange noticed that North Pole Island was quite far from Yunzhong continent. If she flew, it might take a long time, so she asked the maid how many ways to go to Yunzhong. The maid Ian told her that there were several places on North Pole Island with transporting formations, which were very convenient to leave. Mo Tiange was relieved. It seemed the formation masters in Yunzhong were quite powerful. Transporting formations were the most complicated kind of formations, requiring very complicated skills and countless spirit stones. There weren't many transporting formations in the celestial pole, and even if there were, they were short distance and were controlled by big cultivation groups. Yunzhong, on the other hand, was just a small North Pole island, but it unexpectedly had several transporting formations. If she wanted to use transporting formations, she only needed to pay spirit stones. After resting for several days and recovering her energy, Mo Tiange finally left the small courtyard where she temporarily lived and went to the town. The maid Ayan said the bazaar on North Pole Island was famous in Yunzhong. Even core formation cultivators would come here to buy things. Mo Tiange was rather surprised to hear that. Kuanzhong City, the most prosperous place for individual cultivators in the celestial pole, wasn't much. North Pole Island was just a small island in the northernmost part of Yunzhong. It was far less prosperous than Yunzhong itself. Ferry, this is our busiest street. On this street, you can buy anything you want, especially monster cores. As long as you can't think of it, there's nothing you can't buy. Ayan walked in front, proudly introducing the street to her. Mo Tiange originally planned to stroll around by herself, but Ayan said she was very familiar with the bazaar on North Pole Island, so after some thought, Mo Tiange decided to take Ayan with her. Is that really the case? Mo Tiange simply smiled at Ayan's question and asked. Of course she knew this was an exaggeration, but since Ayan dared to say this bazaar should have something worthy of praise. Of course. Ayan said, reportedly, tens of thousands of years ago, our North Pole Island was still very desolate. Later, a cultivator came here and discovered spirit veins, so it gradually became lively. In the beginning, only some cultivation clans and small cultivation groups established themselves here. Later, other people discovered that there were a lot of sea beasts here, so they came here to hunt beasts. Gradually, today's North Pole Island came into being. I see. That's not all. Ayan said with a smile. Originally, when these cultivators hunted sea beasts, they would sell them inland. But because more and more people came to hunt beasts, many merchants simply set up branches here, specializing in collecting sea beast cores. Gradually, North Pole Island became the largest demonic beast core market in all of Yunzhong. Even the cores of land demonic beasts were sold here. It could be said that if you can't find a monster core on North Pole Island, it'll be very difficult to find one in all of Yunzhong. Is that so? Such a small island was unexpectedly the largest demonic beast core market in Yunzhong. If that was the case, she could see what rare demonic beast cores were and buy any suitable ones. As soon as she walked into this so-called monster core street, she immediately heard one call after another. Fellow Daoist, do you want to buy a monster core? I have a high-grade sea beast core here. If it's damaged, I'll compensate you double the price. Seniors, our humble shop has a new batch of monster cores. They've just arrived from inland, and each one is guaranteed to be of high quality. First come, first served. We'll only sell them out. 1 5th-rank cloud-splitting beast's core, starting from 1,000 spirit stones. If you're interested, please come inside and discuss in detail. Mo Tiange clicked her tongue in wonder. Market squares in the celestial pole were rarely this lively. Even if cultivators did business, they wouldn't hawk their wares like mortals. Most of them just quietly set up their stalls and waited for customers to come. In Yunzhong, however, it wasn't like this. Cultivators also hawked their wares and solicited customers like mortals. Perhaps it was because mortals in Yunzhong also cultivated? Therefore, in Yunzhong, there wasn't a huge difference between cultivators and mortals like in the celestial pole. Just as she was thinking, someone approached her. Fellow Daoist, are you interested in a 4th-rank thundercloud treading on snow beast's core? Mo Tiange waved her hand at the cultivator who solicited business, indicating she wasn't interested. She then continued to stroll on the street with Ayan. The person who spoke to her was a foundation-building cultivator. In the celestial pole, how could a foundation-building cultivator do business like this? He probably wouldn't even be willing to set up a stall. Sure enough, the customs in Yunzhong were greatly different from those in the celestial pole. Fairy, are you just going to look around? You don't have anything you want? Ayan asked eagerly. Mo Tiange glanced at her, then asked with a smile, do you have any shops to recommend? Ayan twisted the handkerchief in her hand embarrassedly and said, our boss also has a shop here. If you recommend customers there, you can give them a 10% discount. I also get a commission. From her first experience on North Pole Island, as well as what she saw and heard during this time, Mo Tiange already knew that this was the customs in Yunzhong. Their business was much more prosperous than in the celestial pole, so she just smiled. Seeing that Mo Tiange wasn't interested, Ayan didn't say much and started to introduce the shop in front of her. Fairy, please take a look. This Jade Qilin Pavilion is the shop of Tianyin sect, the largest cultivation group on North Pole Island. There are a lot of things inside. You can even find 6th or 7th rank beast cores here. I heard the most precious treasure of Jade Qilin Pavilion is an 8th rank beast's inner core. 8th rank inner core? Tianyin sect has nascent soul cultivators? Ayan nodded. Tianyin sect has 2 nascent soul cultivators, and Wuxia School also has a nascent soul cultivator. Our North Pole Island is very small, we only have these 3 nascent soul cultivators. North Pole Island was indeed very small. Mo Tiange had seen the map. Compared with Yunzhong continent, North Pole Island was just a small dot in the north, roughly equivalent to a city in the 3 big countries. But such a small island actually had 3 nascent soul cultivators. She really wondered how many nascent soul cultivators there were in the whole of Yunzhong. Perhaps it would be twice as many as the 2 poles? Fairy, do you want to go into Jade Qilin Pavilion to take a look? Mo Tiange nodded indifferently. She had nothing to do anyway, so she might as well stroll around. Once she entered Jade Qilin Pavilion, a cultivator immediately came to greet her. Senior, please come in, please come in. Even if it was a shop of the number 1 cultivation group on North Pole Island, it was still very enthusiastic when it came to entertaining its guests. Mo Tiange heard that although the spirit veins on North Pole Island weren't bad, there weren't many spirit stone veins, so they were very dependent on trading with foreign cultivators. Only in this way could they obtain enough spirit stones for their own cultivation. What do you need, senior? Our shop has the most abundant beast cores on North Pole Island. No matter what beast core you want, as long as you say it, you'll most likely find it in our shop. In addition, we also have spiritual plants, magic tools, and the like. The one who rushed over to greet them enthusiastically was a mortal cultivator with a big smile on his face. Ayan took a look at Mo Tiange's expression, then bowed to the man. Big brother, we'll take a look first. If we need anything, we'll call you. Okay, please take your time to look. The shop assistant was enthusiastic, but not overly so. After greeting them, he politely retreated. Mo Tiange thought in her heart that people from Yunzhong really knew how to do business. Not only did they make people feel that they were attentive, but they also weren't as sticky candy. Their enthusiasm was just right, making people feel very comfortable. She couldn't help but think that if the things were good, buying 1 or 2 wouldn't be bad. She looked around. This Jade Qilin Pavilion was very big. It was densely packed with counters and people were coming and going. All of them were low-level cultivators who were talking to shop assistants in low voices. Fairy, the first floor sells low-level beast cores, which probably won't be interesting to you. The second floor sells middle-level beast cores. If you want a high-grade monster core, you can directly ask the shopkeeper here. However, if Fairy just wants to stroll around, it'd be better to go to the underground hall. That's the most distinctive place in Jade Qilin Pavilion. Underground hall? Mo Tiange asked with interest. How distinctive? Ayan smiled. Fairy, you'll know once you take a look. Mo Tiange thought about it but didn't object. She nodded and said, lead the way. Ayan curtsied and led her around those counters with familiarity. They entered a carved stone door and walked down the stone steps behind the door. Mo Tiange already sensed that there were a lot of people down there. When she reached the bottom and entered an open door, her eyes couldn't help but brighten. In front of her was a very spacious hall that could almost be called a public square. There were densely packed stalls inside, and countless cultivators and mortals were shuttling back and forth here. The sound of their conversations rang in her ears. "This is," Ian smiled and said, "this underground hall is Jade Qilin Pavilion's signature. This is a free market. There are no shops here, only customers. No matter what cultivation level they are, if they want to buy or sell, they can come here to take a look. Jade Qilin Pavilion doesn't charge any fees." Emotienga slowly swept her gaze over and said, "That being the case, what's the difference between this place and the stalls outside?" "The difference is that Jade Qilin Pavilion has a treasure appraiser stationed here. If the buyer and the seller reach an agreement, they can look for the appraiser here to appraise the authenticity and quality of the item. If the transaction is successful, Jade Qilin Pavilion will take a 10% fee. If the item doesn't match the seller's description and the transaction can't be concluded, they won't take a single cent." "Oh." Emotienga finally understood. "It's a bit safer for them to trade here, right?" "Yes. If the appraiser makes a mistake, Jade Qilin Pavilion will compensate them according to the price. What many cultivators fear the most when they come to North Pole Island to buy beast cores is to sell inferior ones as good ones, so they're willing to spend a bit more money to buy peace of mind." Chapter 348. Walking in the free market was an eye-opener for Emotienga. It was not because the things here were good, but because there were many kinds of monster cores. She had never heard of many monster cores. She thought they were the unique demonic beasts in Yunzhong. The cultivators doing business here ranged from the aura refining realm to the foundation building realm. She even saw 2 core formation cultivators. Most of the aura refining cultivators entering and exiting the place looked exhausted and unkempt. Baffled, Emotienga asked Ian, "Why do these aura refining cultivators look so dispirited?" Ian answered, "These cultivators are all hunting beasts here. Their cultivation levels are relatively low, so they can't hunt high-level demonic beasts. They can only kill first-rank demonic beasts. However, many first-rank demonic beasts don't even have a Yao Dan. It's not easy to find a Yao Dan, and the other materials of demonic beasts aren't worth much." At this point, Emotienga finally understood. These aura refining cultivators were the lowest level of the cultivators who supported the beast core market on North Pole Island. They did the most tiring and dangerous work to obtain beast cores with great difficulty. They brought them to this free market to sell and earn some spirit stones for their own cultivation. They were not businessmen, but workers. In the past, when my father was still alive, he was also like this. Sometimes, when he came back from the sea, he would be so tired that he couldn't even stand steadily, but he still had to pull himself together and come out to sell Yao cores. Ian suddenly said in a daze. "Your father?" Emotienga turned to look at her. Ian lowered her head and said softly, "My father was also an immortal cultivator, but his spirit root wasn't good, and he has already passed away." After a moment of silence, Emotienga heaved a sigh and patted Emotienga's shoulder to comfort her. Ian revealed a smile. "Thank you, Fairy. I'm fine. Father has already passed away for 2 years. I'm already used to it." She turned around, raised her hand, and pointed at a small door in the distance. She continued, "That's where the Jade Qilin Pavilion's appraisers are located. Even if you don't want to trade, you can still find them to appraise your items. You just have to pay the appraisal fee." Emotienga looked up and saw that the small gate was filled with people coming and going. Most of them were buyers and sellers, but there were also some who were alone. She wasn't interested in the appraisal and looked away after a few glances. But a moment later, it turned back. No, she seemed to have seen something just now. Emotienga strode towards the appraisal room. "Fairy?" Startled, Ian followed. The small appraisal room was surrounded by several appraisers. Emotienga raised her head and looked around, but she didn't see the person she saw just now. "Fairy, are you looking for someone?" After searching for a while but finding nothing, Emotienga finally gave up. She squeezed out of the crowd and shook her head. Maybe I was mistaken. Oh. Ian cleverly didn't ask any more questions. After this incident, Tiange lost interest in shopping. She said, "There's nothing to see here. Let's go." Once they left the free market, Tiange didn't want to stroll around anymore. She thought for a moment, then said to Ian, "I'm going to the seaside for a walk. It's not appropriate to take you with me. You should go back first." Ian responded, then thought for a moment and said, "Fairy, when cultivators go to hunt beasts, most of them go through the northeast pier. The west area is where the major sects are located, so they might not receive guests." "Okay, I got it." Hearing her reply, Ian curtsied, then turned around and left. Tiange didn't stay there for long. She left the bazaar, flew into the air and flew east. As she flew, she thought about what happened just now. In that free market, she saw a woman dressed in black. That woman's back was very similar to Nie Wuxiang's. According to reason, the road from the eastern sea to the South Pole Island was very hidden. If she hadn't seen the jade slip Mo Yaoqing left behind, the possibility of her finding it was very low. But if she went through the South Sea, the distance from the celestial pole to Yunzhong wasn't only long, but it was also extremely dangerous. How could Nie Wuxiang, a core formation cultivator, get there? Could it be that that woman wasn't Nie Wuxiang and she was mistaken? But that woman's back was too similar to Nie Wuxiang's, and the style of her clothes was also the same. Even if she might have mistaken her back, it was impossible for their clothes to be so similar, right? Tiange knitted her brows and thought for a while, feeling full of questions. Besides, that woman's cultivation level was also in the foundation building realm, which didn't match. However, this wasn't certain. She could restrain her spiritual breath, so could others. She hadn't flown far when she suddenly felt several spiritual auras approaching her. Right now, she was pretending to be in the foundation building realm, so her flying speed was also very slow. These people were also in the foundation building realm. She didn't know what kind of flying magic tools they were using, but they unexpectedly caught up to her very quickly. Tiange intended to give way, but who would have thought that those people would suddenly split up and flank her, completely surrounding her? Upon realizing this, she stopped and watched these cultivators approaching her with a frown. There were both men and women among them, and they all wore the same clothes. They seemed to be disciples of some cultivation group. "Gentlemen, what's the matter?" 3 early-stage foundation building cultivators and 2 middle-stage foundation building cultivators all had hostile expressions. Tiange frowned. She was just passing by, and this place wasn't the location of the cultivation groups Ian mentioned, so why did these people come? Upon hearing what she said, these people exchanged glances with each other. The middle-stage foundation building cultivator in the lead had a gloomy expression as he shouted, "Hand over the thing." Tiange's frown deepened. Her gaze slowly swept over the cultivators surrounding her and she said, "Gentlemen, you must have mistaken me for someone else, right?" Under her gaze, these cultivators couldn't help but cower. Those with low cultivation levels were even more startled, as if they were being suppressed by a high-level cultivator. However, although this female cultivator's cultivation level was higher than theirs, she was only in the foundation building realm. Once he calmed his mind, the leader once again put on a cold expression. "Mistaken you for someone else? Your accent is obviously the same as that little thief's, yet you still say you're mistaken." This person's tone was really unpleasant to hear. Moreover, without any explanation, he immediately identified her as a little thief, which made Tiange even more unhappy. However, this wasn't the celestial pole, and she was a newcomer, so it was better for her to restrain herself a bit. With that thought in mind, she swallowed her anger and said slowly, "Gentlemen, are there any misunderstandings? I just left the Beast Core Market and was about to go to the pier when I was intercepted by you on the way. I really don't know why you're here." Upon hearing what she said, these people's expressions changed greatly. One of them shouted, "Sure enough, it's you. You still dare to quibble." Tiange was stunned. Was there something wrong with what she said? "Your Excellency." The leader clenched the magic tool in his hand and said coldly, "You'd better obediently hand over the thing." Although you're in the late stage of the foundation building realm, you can't escape even if the 5 of us work together. These people were obsessed with who she was. Regardless of the reason, Tiange was also annoyed. She said coldly, "This is the last time I'm telling you. If I say I'm not, then I'm not. If you want to fight, go ahead." The leader's expression suddenly became unsightly. In the end, he clenched his teeth and signaled his companions with his eyes. Upon receiving his signal, the 5 of them moved almost at the same time. The 5 of them took out banners at the same time and each of them unfolded them in the wind. In an instant, spiritual aura surged and a cold wind blew. Tiange narrowed her eyes. With her cultivation level, she naturally wasn't afraid of these 5 foundation-building cultivators. However, these 5 people's techniques were quite strange. It seemed to be a kind of formation that used people as a formation. She stared at the banners in their hands. The banners were painted with the Tai Chi 8 trigrams as well as some strange pictures. Although she didn't understand them very well, she could roughly tell they were some formation diagrams. A thought flashed through her mind and she asked, "Are you people from Tianyan sect?" Upon hearing that, the leader snorted coldly. "No need to act. You just stole something from our Jade Qilin Pavilion, so why are you acting like you don't know us?" Tiange had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. This person's overbearing attitude made her unhappy, so she immediately flung her sleeves and released her momentum. "I really don't know. What are you going to do about it?" Once the momentum of a core formation cultivator was released, the 5 people's expressions changed greatly. One of them shouted, "Senior Martial Brother, you're actually in the core formation realm." The leader's face turned pale and red. His attitude became a bit more restrained, but his gaze became more resolute. "Your Excellency is a core formation senior, so why are you pretending to be in the foundation building realm? Don't tell me you don't have designs on our Tianyan sect?" Tiange said coldly, "I'll restrain my spiritual breath if I want to. Why should I explain myself to juniors like you? You're falsely accusing me of stealing something from you for no reason, so do you think I have to explain everything clearly to you? Even if your Tianyan sect is the biggest cultivation group on North Pole Island, this doesn't make sense." After her speech, the 5 people hesitated. If she was a foundation-building cultivator, they could just take her back and hand her over to the cultivation group to be dealt with. However, this female cultivator was in the core formation realm. They couldn't beat her, but they also couldn't let her go. After all, she was the most suspicious person on their way here. In fact, Tianyan sect was also used to being the dominant sect on North Pole Island, so they couldn't lower their face. Previously, they aggressively came to stop them, but now that they found out the other party was a core formation senior, wouldn't they be a joke if they retreated? Besides, those martial uncles in the cultivation group wouldn't care about their suffering and would only say they didn't do their job well. "Senior." The leader finally softened his tone and said to Tiange, "In fact, our Jade Qilin Pavilion lost an important item. If we don't do our job well, being punished when we go back is a small matter, but at that time, the whole North Pole Island will be in turmoil. This matter is of great importance, so I'd like to ask Senior to go back with us and explain it clearly to our sect." The corners of Tiange's mouth rose, forming a smiling expression. She was a core formation cultivator, yet she was implicated in some matter for no reason and was taken back by a few foundation-building cultivators. If word got out, wouldn't she become a laughingstock? Could it be that the people in Yunzhong all did things like this? Or was it because Tianyan sect was the most powerful here, so they were this arrogant? Gentlemen, if your sect elders asked me, I might agree. But with just the few of you, wouldn't it be ridiculous for me to obediently go back with you? Senior. The one who looked the youngest among the 5 people shouted, although we're foundation-building cultivators, we represent Tianyan sect. If you're unwilling to go back with us, we'll have to report this to our sect elders. At that time, I'm afraid you won't look good. Junior Martial Brother Qiao. Once that person finished speaking, the leader immediately shouted. Unfortunately, he'd already said it. When he turned around, he saw that Emo Tienga's face was already covered in a layer of frost. Good. Go back and report this to your sect elders. She raised her head and arrogantly glanced at the 5 people in front of her. I'll wait for your sect elders to come and give me an explanation. Chapter 349. Emo Tienga flung her sleeves and left, and the 5 foundation-building cultivators didn't chase after her. Senior Marshal Brother, what should we do? The foundation-building cultivator asked anxiously. Although he was full of momentum just now that Emo Tienga flung her sleeves and left, he was worried. The leader frowned and said angrily, "How would I know?" Tianyan sect was indeed the biggest cultivation group on North Pole Island, but they were only foundation-building cultivators and didn't have high-level cultivator seniors. Even if they suffered losses in front of a core formation cultivator, no one would stand up for them. On the contrary, their masters and seniors would think they didn't do their job well. After all, they were the ones who offended the other party with their words first. Thinking of this senior marshal brother had a headache. Forget it, let's go back first. In the end, he said, the thing we lost this time is very important, so the marshal uncles in the sect will definitely intervene. When we go back, we just need to report it honestly. At worst, we'll just be punished. The others were all dejected. It was already bad luck for them to lose something when they were in charge of guarding the place. They wanted to chase the person back to make up for their mistake, but they also caused this kind of trouble. With the sect head's strict management, they didn't know how heavy the punishment would be. Emo Tienga didn't mention these people. After flying for a while, she finally stopped. There was no anger on her face, only confusion. From the words of these foundation-building cultivators just now, she deduced what happened. Someone must have stolen some kind of treasure from the Jade Qilin Pavilion just now. They chased after the thief, only to discover that she was acting suspiciously, so they thought she was the thief who stole the treasure. This was interesting. Since they regarded her as the thief who stole the treasure, it showed that her figure and cultivation level were similar to the thief's. Moreover, the time when the treasure was stolen should be when she left Jade Qilin Pavilion. In addition, as soon as she spoke, these foundation-building cultivators said her accent was very similar to the thief's. She narrowed her eyes and remembered the figure she saw in Jade Qilin Pavilion that looked like Nie Wuxiang. Although Nie Wuxiang didn't look like her, their figures were similar if they didn't look at their faces. Moreover, at that time, her cultivation level also seemed to be in the foundation-building realm. Most importantly, if that person was really Nie Wuxiang, they were both from the celestial pole, so to the people in Yunzhong, their accents were indeed similar. Could it be that Nie Wuxiang really came to Yunzhong? Once she thought of this possibility, Emo Tienga felt the situation was far from good. If Nie Wuxiang came to Yunzhong, did she come alone or with her master, Master Songfeng? What exactly did she steal from the Jade Qilin Pavilion? From the looks of these 5 foundation-building cultivators, she must have stolen something extraordinary. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so she presumably didn't lack spirit stones. If she could buy it, why did she have to steal it? Emo Tienga rubbed her forehead. She had a terrible headache. Why was she so unlucky? He was walking on his own path and did not meddle in other people's business, yet he was dragged into a quarrel again. Regardless of whether her guess was right or not, whether that person was Nie Wuxiang or not, she was already inevitably dragged into this matter. Just now, he didn't treat those foundation establishment cultivators nicely because of their arrogant attitude. The rule of the cultivation world was that the strong were respected. She was a core formation cultivator, so berating several foundation-building cultivators naturally wasn't a problem. Even if these people were disciples of Tianyan sect, the number 1 cultivation group on North Pole Island, it was still the same. However, that was all he could do. She was now on North Pole Island. As long as these people reported this matter, her whereabouts should be found very quickly. Due to her identity as a core formation cultivator, Tianyan sect's core formation cultivators would come out. At that time, she couldn't not give them any face like she did now. In any case, a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Besides, Tianyin sect had 2 nascent soul cultivators, so she couldn't really fall out with them. She originally wanted to go to the docks to see how Yunzhong's cultivators hunted sea beasts and chat with them to learn more about Yunzhong. But now, she was no longer in the mood, so she took a detour and simply went back to the inn. Ian was astonished to see her coming back so quickly. She had just arrived, but this fairy already came back. Sure enough, she was a powerful cultivator. Mo Tiange didn't feel like explaining to her. Before she went back to the cultivation room, she told her, "In the next few days, if I have visitors, just call me directly in the courtyard." Ian was baffled. This fairy had lived here for more than half a month and hadn't even left the door. No matter how she looked at it, she didn't look like she was visiting a friend. This time, she just went out for a trip, but she mentioned visitors. Ian really didn't understand what was going on. However, she was only a maid hired by the inn to serve cultivators, so she wasn't qualified to ask why, so she just answered, yes. Mo Tiange furrowed her brows, stepped into the cultivation room, opened the defensive formation, and entered the virtual sky world. Inside the virtual sky world, everything was normal. Feifei and Xiaohua were playing, and Xiaofan was cultivating in the stream. Compared to those two, Xiaofan not only had human-like intelligence, but its behavior was also more human-like. Although it was still a child among demonic beasts, it was very fanatical about cultivation. After entering the virtual sky world, it was even more like a fish in water. At this thought, Mo Tiange's mind wandered. She wasn't very used to the environment of the virtual sky world, but her 3 spiritual beasts didn't have this problem. Perhaps it was because demonic beasts' cultivation method was closer to instinct? Unfortunately, she couldn't use demonic beasts' cultivation method for reference. Otherwise, she and she wouldn't have to be separated. The people from Tianyin sect came faster than she expected. In less than half a day, while Mo Tiange was meditating inside the virtual sky world with her eyes closed, she heard Ian's voice from outside, telling her that there was a visitor. Mo Tiange sighed, opened her eyes, and used her divine sense to order Xiaofan and Xiaohua to come over. "Master, is something the matter?" Mo Tiange stroked Xiaohua, who had thrown itself into her arms, then said to the 2 beasts, "It might be a bit troublesome. You 2 go into the spiritual beast bag first and follow me out." Xiaofan didn't ask anything. Seeing Mo Tiange open the spiritual beast bag, it very consciously went inside. Xiaohua, on the other hand, rolled several times unhappily before reluctantly entering the spiritual beast bag. Mo Tiange put away the 2 spiritual beast bags and made sure all her magic weapons were in the most suitable places, ready to fight at any time. She didn't stay any longer. She went out of the virtual sky world, opened the restriction and walked out. "Fairy." Upon seeing her, Ian stepped forward and bowed. "The guest is waiting in the hall." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile, then walked towards the small reception hall. Ian was well trained, so she had already invited the guest into the hall and served them good tea. Right now, the person sitting in the hall was an early-stage core formation female cultivator. She had a head full of pearls and jade, and her clothes were layered with ornaments, looking incomparably gorgeous. Just by looking at her back, one would feel she had a threatening air of nobility. Mo Tiange couldn't help but think of her master, Lord Daoist Jinghe. This style was really similar to her master's. If Lord Daoist Jinghe had the style of an incapable ruler, then this female cultivator had the style of an empress. This female cultivator was leisurely drinking tea. When she sensed someone coming, she put down the teacup unhurriedly and raised her head to meet Mo Tiange's gaze. At that moment, Mo Tiange couldn't help but be stunned. This female cultivator was beautiful. She had a threatening air of immortality and was also noble and elegant. She was the kind of beauty Mo Tiange had never seen in the cultivation world. Compared with those fairies who looked as elegant as immortals but were in fact vulgar, although this female cultivator had secular magnificence, her temperament was even more detached from the secular world. Upon seeing Mo Tiange, this female cultivator stood up and bowed to greet her. "I'm a cultivator from Tianyin sect. My Daoist name is Chizu." Outsiders call me Madame Chizu out of courtesy. Greetings to fellow Daoist. Mo Tiange bowed to return the greeting. Fellow Daoist Chizu is too polite. My surname is Mo, and my first name is Qingwei. So it's fellow Daoist Qingwei. Madame Chizu smiled and praised her neither hurriedly nor slowly. Fellow Daoist Qingwei looks so young, but your cultivation level is already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. It's really shocking. Isn't fellow Daoist Chizu also young and beautiful? Why must you make fun of me? Mo Tiange said faintly, then called out to Madame Chizu. Fellow Daoist, please sit. Madame Chizu sat down with a smile, then picked up her teacup again. The two of them took the opportunity to drink tea while secretly sizing each other up. Mo Tiange could see that although this Madame Chizu was only in the early stage of the core formation realm, her status in Tianyan's sect shouldn't be low. She had a graceful temperament, her every movement was calm and composed, and there was an indistinct might around her. Ordinary core formation cultivators didn't have this kind of might. Presumably, she held power in the sect to have this kind of momentum. While Mo Tiange was sizing the other party up, Madame Chizu was also looking at her. When she first saw Mo Tiange, astonishment flitted across her eyes. Although many of the high-level female cultivators in the immortal cultivation world retained their youthful beauty, in the eyes of experienced people, they would still be able to see the subtle differences. However, this core formation female cultivator she'd never seen on North Pole Island seemed to be very young. Suspicion arose in Madame Chizu's heart. Could it be that she was a disciple of some big cultivation group on the mainland? With that thought in mind, Madame Chizu's eyes flickered. She asked with a smile, Fellow Daoist Qingwei, may I know where you're from and why did you come to North Pole Island? For cultivators, such a direct question was rather impolite, but when Madame Chizu said it with such a tone and expression, it made people feel that it was only natural. Mo Tiange put down her teacup, then said with a smile, Forgive me, fellow Daoist. I can't tell you my background in detail, but my purpose for coming here is ordinary. I just went out to travel and came here. Madame Chizu raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, Fellow Daoist, you're just traveling and not here to buy beast cores? Mo Tiange answered calmly, If I see suitable beast cores, I'll naturally buy them. However, it doesn't matter if I can't buy them. Upon hearing her answer, Madame Chizu smiled. This kind of behavior was indeed like that of a cultivator from a big cultivation group. Only people like them wouldn't take a huge beast core market like North Pole Island seriously. With that thought in mind, Madame Chizu said slowly, Fellow Daoist Qingwei, I heard from the innkeeper just now that you claimed to be an individual cultivator and even suppressed your cultivation level, pretending to be a foundation-building cultivator. May I know if there's any trouble you can't talk about? Mo Tiange smiled faintly. She stared at Madame Chizu but didn't say anything. Under Mo Tiange's gaze, Madame Chizu gradually felt that her question was a bit inappropriate. Since it was a trouble she couldn't talk about, how could she talk about it to an outsider? Fellow Daoist Chizu, Mo Tiange said, I don't like to be ostentatious, and I also don't like to talk about my master's background. I don't need to explain this to you, do I? Although Mo Tiange's current expression was smiling, how could a smart person like Madame Chizu not sense the warning in Mo Tiange's words? This thought immediately emerged in Madame Chizu's mind that this woman wasn't someone to be trifled with. Madame Chizu was about to speak, but Mo Tiange raised her hand to stop her. She dusted off her sleeves, then said calmly, I know fellow Daoist's purpose for coming here. Since fellow Daoist treats me politely, and I'm not ungrateful, I'll explain it clearly to your group. Chapter 350. A smile soon appeared on Madame Chizu's face. She said earnestly, I'm extremely honored that fellow Daoist Qingwei can understand. Just now, my sect's disciples were incompetent and offended fellow Daoist. I apologize on their behalf. As she said this, Madame Chizu stood up and bowed cautiously. Upon seeing this, a smile appeared on Mo Tiange's face and she made a gesture to help him up. Fellow Daoist, you're too polite. It's just a junior's impetuous behavior, there's no need to be like this. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. They were very satisfied with each other's tactfulness. Tianyan sect was the largest cultivation group on North Pole Island, so Mo Tiange naturally didn't want to offend them. Since the other party had expressed goodwill, she naturally took advantage of the situation. Madame Chizu, on the other hand, thought that since this female cultivator was young and had a profound cultivation level, it was very likely that she was a disciple of a large sect, so it would be better to rope her in. Those who had cultivated to the core formation realm were at least somewhat clever, even if they didn't have great wisdom. Nobody wanted to make enemies out of nothing. The two of them had a tacit understanding and sat down to drink tea again. Mo Tiange smiled and said, "In fact, I'm also confused about this matter. Today, I indeed went to the Monster Core Market and also entered your Tianyan sect's Jade Qilin Pavilion. However, I only looked around for a while before leaving. The maidservants outside could testify to this. It was my first time on North Pole Island, so I wanted to go to the docks to see how the cultivators here hunted beasts. Who knew that when I was halfway there, I'd be stopped by several foundation-building cultivators from your sect? In terms of time, I was only separated from the maidservant for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. There's simply no time for me to steal the goods of your esteemed sect. Fellow Daoist Chizu can verify this." Madame Chizu nodded as she listened. By the time Madame Chizu finished speaking, she already smiled and said, "Since fellow Daoist Qingwei already explained it clearly, I naturally believe you. It's those kids from my sect who don't know how to do things and have disturbed you. I'm really sorry." Mo Tiange smiled faintly. Tianyan sect found this place so quickly, so her whereabouts should have been investigated long ago. However, in the end, she was a core formation cultivator, so a cultivator in the same realm as her had to meet her to completely eliminate suspicion. Since this Madame Chizu believed her the moment she heard what she said, then this matter could be considered to be over. Since it's a misunderstanding, let's just talk about it. Fellow Daoist Chizu, you don't have to worry about it. Mo Tiange paused for a moment, then asked after some deliberation, "Fellow Daoist Chizu, logically speaking, this matter is your group's secret." I'm an outsider, so I shouldn't ask too much. However, since this matter involves me, I would like to ask, how is that little thief similar to me, causing your sect's disciples to misunderstand me as a thief? I wonder if fellow Daoist can tell me? Madame Chizu muttered to herself for a moment, then said, "Fellow Daoist Qingwei, this matter involves my group's internal affairs, so please forgive me for not being able to tell you in detail. However, I can answer fellow Daoist's question. According to the disciples of my sect, that thief is a foundation establishment female cultivator. Whether it's her figure or her cultivation level, both match fellow Daoists. Most importantly, fellow Daoist's accent is exactly the same as that person's. Even if they aren't the same person, they should be from the same hometown." "I see." Mo Tiange's expression didn't change as she nodded faintly. Seeing that Mo Tiange's expression didn't change, Madame Chizu pondered for a moment. In the end, she stood up and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoist Qingwei, my humble sect still has a lot of chores to take care of. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, I should also take my leave. I'm very sorry for disturbing you this time. If fellow Daoist Qingwei is still on North Pole Island, I'll invite you to a gathering again." Fellow Daoist Chizu is too polite. Mo Tiange also stood up. "Since fellow Daoist has something to do, I won't say much. I hope we'll have a chance to meet again in the future." Madame Chizu smiled and curtsied. "I hope so." After seeing Madame Chizu off, Mo Tiange returned to the small hall, and her expression immediately darkened. In Jade Qilin Pavilion, she saw a figure similar to Nie Wuxiang, who seemed to be in the foundation building realm. Jade Qilin Pavilion was robbed at that time. The thief's cultivation level and figure were similar. Tianyan sect's disciples said her accent was also similar to that person's. In the whole of North Pole Island and even in Yunzhong, aside from people who also came from the Celestial Pole, who else would have a similar accent as her? With so many coincidences coming together, the answer was already on the verge of being revealed. Nie Wuxiang. She wasn't mistaken. That person was indeed Nie Wuxiang. In this way, it triggered another fatal speculation. Did Nie Wuxiang come alone or with Master Song Feng? Thinking of this possibility, Mo Tiange's face turned pale. She wasn't afraid of rushing into Yunzhong alone. In any case, she was a core formation cultivator now, so she was confident that she could already hold her own with her own abilities. But if she really ran into Master Song Feng here, it would be a disaster. She had lived for more than 100 years and met many nascent soul cultivators, but only this Master Song Feng made her feel fear from the bottom of her heart. Because of this person, she almost experienced the most terrifying thing a woman could do. This made her realize that her strength was far from enough. Only by standing at the top of the cultivators could she guarantee that she wouldn't get hurt. If she had the chance, she wished she could grind this person's bones and scatter his ashes. But now, her strength wasn't enough. If she ran into Master Song Feng again, she might not be so lucky. Fairy! Ayan's trembling voice rang in her ears. Mo Tiange turned around, put away her gloomy expression, and asked faintly, "What's wrong?" Ayan hesitated for a long time, then asked cautiously, "Fairy, you haven't offended Tianyan sect, right?" Mo Tiange frowned. "Did your shopkeeper ask me to ask?" Ayan shook her head. "I just want to remind Fairy that Tianyan sect has 2 nascent soul cultivators, so it's fully deserving of being the #1 sect on North Pole Island. If Fairy has any conflicts with them, it'd be best for you to endure it." Upon seeing her worried expression, Mo Tiange felt warmth in her heart. She smiled and said, "It's all right. I don't have any conflicts with them." Ayan heaved a sigh of relief and touched her chest. "That's good. Fairy is an amiable person. I don't want Fairy to suffer losses here." Hearing what she said, Mo Tiange smiled. "Thank you." Before long, the inn's shopkeeper Dong hurried over and respectfully apologized to Mo Tiange. As it turned out, when Madame Chizu came to visit, he already knew that Mo Tiange was a core formation cultivator. He felt that his hospitality wasn't satisfactory and didn't match her status as a core formation cultivator, so he especially came to ask Mo Tiange if she needed anything. Mo Tiange deliberately lowered her cultivation level, so she naturally didn't have any other opinions. She just expressed that she didn't need anything and that things were fine as they were, then sent shopkeeper Dong away. After shopkeeper Dong left, she told Ayan that she wouldn't go out during this period of time and that if anyone came to visit, she should just decline and not disturb them. Soon after, she returned to the cultivation room, opened the defensive formation and entered the virtual sky world. Just a moment ago, she thought of another possibility. People came and went in the beast core market, and there were many cultivators leaving at every moment. How did those 5 foundation building cultivators catch up with her so coincidentally? Even if there weren't many female foundation building cultivators, and there were even fewer who had a similar figure to Nie Wuxiang, it was still impossible for them to target her so quickly, right? Thinking about it this way, it was very likely that Nie Wuxiang left in the same direction as her, so when those foundation building cultivators saw her, they naturally regarded her as a thief. In that case, another problem arose. If Nie Wuxiang really went in the same direction as her, was it possible that she discovered her? Thinking one step further, was it possible that Nie Wuxiang discovered her and deliberately led the pursuers to her? Mo Tiange was drenched in cold sweat. She didn't dare to think about it anymore. She calmed herself down and thought about it carefully again. Although this was only her conjecture, it was still a possibility. Her divine sense was powerful, but Nie Wuxiang was Master Song Feng's disciple after all. Who knew if she had some strange method to hide her breath from her? After thinking for a long time, Mo Tiange exhaled. Since she already had a guess, she had to think of a countermeasure. She didn't have any hatred for Nie Wuxiang. Back on Demonic Mountain, although it was she who led the way for Master Song Feng, she was his disciple after all, so what she did was understandable. As for later, Nie Wuxiang saved her, so she was a bit grateful. In any case, Nie Wuxiang helped her avoid a terrible experience. However, she was the one who brought Master Song Feng here, and Nie Wuxiang's identity was very sensitive. Although Mo Tiange felt a bit grateful, she never thought about repaying her or doing anything else. She just thought that if she could avoid Nie Wuxiang in the future, she shouldn't be enemies with Nie Wuxiang, which could also be considered repaying her. Now that Nie Wuxiang might appear here and plot against her, Mo Tiange became even more cautious. Although that was what she thought, she didn't think Nie Wuxiang thought the same. After all, Nie Wuxiang's identity was there. With Master Song Feng here, they were enemies. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange already made a decision. Whether Master Song Feng was here or not, she didn't want to get involved in this matter. Since she already explained it to Tianyan sect, she'd just pretend she didn't know and stay out of it. She had the virtual sky world. As long as she hid and didn't go out, neither Tianyan sect nor Master Song Feng could find her. Mo Tiange smiled, opened the spiritual beast bag, and released Xiaohua and Xiaofan. It's all right. You can go play. Xiaohua barked cheerfully and immediately ran away, probably to find Fei to continue playing. Xiaofan, however, didn't move. She floated in the air and said with some worry, "Master, are you worried?" Mo Tiange was stunned. Xiaofan said, "The space between your eyebrows is wrinkled. Is there some trouble?" Mo Tiange was stunned for a moment, then smiled. "It's nothing. Although it's a bit troublesome, as long as we don't go out, we'll be fine." Xiaofan nodded, not really understanding. "Then are we going to stay here for a long time?" Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. "We can stay out of it if we don't go out. Let's stay here for a month first. You just need to cultivate. If something happens, I'll call you," she said. Xiaofan didn't have any questions and said, "Then I'll go back to cultivate." "Go." Xiaofan went back to the brook to continue cultivating, while Xiaohua and Fei were still rolling around and playing. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then took out the 2 stone sculpture puppets and ordered them to take care of the medicinal fields. She took advantage of this time to take out the magic weapons she got from Mo Yaoqing's cave. Spirit Guiding Bead, 8 trigrams Diagram of Tai Chi, Lotus Umbrella, Spirit Clouds Rui, and Land Shrinking Ruler. Among these 5 things, the Spirit Guiding Bead, 8 trigrams Diagram of Tai Chi, and Lotus Umbrella were all auxiliary objects that didn't need to be deliberately refined. The other 2, however, needed to be refined before they could display their greater power. There was no need to mention Spirit Clouds Rui. This was the magic weapon Mo Yaoqing used in fights of magical powers. Mo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, so if she refined this treasure well, it would be very helpful for her in Yunzhong. In addition, she also had to pay attention to the Land Shrinking Ruler. After advancing to the core formation realm, she couldn't rely on the virtual sky world as a life-saving means. 4 high-level cultivators, entering the virtual sky world for a few breaths could determine life and death, so she must have another life-saving means. It was better to take advantage of this time to refine these 2 magic weapons. If something happened, they would come in handy. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.